Hey guys, tonight we step back into the glimmering sands of ancient Egypt where torchlight dances on polished limestone and secrets cling to every hieroglyph, and you probably won't survive this whispered tale unscathed. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Post your location and local time in the comments and let me know if you're listening by the Nile or under a different sky. You trudge through the hush of a moonlit courtyard, your sandals scuffing the warm flagstones carved during Amenhotep III's grand building projects. He reigned from 1388 to 1351 BCE, commissioning opulent temples that still stand today as testaments to his power. A mainstream historical fact floats in the air as you approach the palace's northern wing, the glint of a golden doorway, etched with scenes of lotus blooms and offering bearers. But this isn't a tale of royal pomp. You're here for the shadows, for the forbidden spark between a noble scribe and the Pharaoh's daughter, an affair so volatile they named it the curse of the Pharaoh's secret love. Historians still argue whether their romance began as genuine affection or as a political maneuver against priestly factions. As you slip past a stone lion statue, you can almost feel the weight of that debate pressing on your neck. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen you read about once. A quirky fringe tidbit insists the lovers use the pungent paste not only to ward off sunburn, but also to disguise their scent from palace guards. You wrinkle your nose at the thought, but a small part of you wonders if it truly worked. Ahead, two gilded scarabs lie side by side near a shattered oil lamp, subtle tokens they exchanged when no one watched. You kneel, brushing away a wisp of papyrus dust, and imagine their trembling fingers carving tiny messages into those jade shells. In the echoing stillness, you can almost hear their whispered vows. Your eyes outshine Ra's first rays, or meet me where the lotus petals drift. A breeze stirs the heavy curtains of the harem's outer corridor. Veiled silhouettes drift behind diaphanous silks, and you catch fragments of gossip. Did you hear? The scribe claims the princess taught him to read secret hieroglyphs, one voice murmurs. She risks the wrath of the high priest if discovered. You remind yourself that palace intrigue was as common as date palms, yet nothing tastes sweeter than scandal in a realm ruled by divine kings. You press onward, your heart pounding with each measured step on marble thresholds. A mainstream fact anchors you. Amenhotep III's era was known for luxurious festivals and diplomatic marriages to foreign princesses, but beneath that veneer lay currents of tension among competing priesthoods. Some say this scribe was a pawn in a wider game of power. Others insist historians still argue whether the real curse was political propaganda rather than dark magic. A flicker of torchlight reveals a narrow archway leading to the royal garden where papyrus reeds sway in a shallow canal. You slip through, ducking low to avoid the watchful eyes of a bronze cat statue, its emerald eyes glinting like the lover's cursed amulet, the very trinket said to bind hearts and doom its possessor to unending longing. As you step into the cool mist rising from the water, you sense the murmured pulse of two hearts hidden somewhere among the nighttime blooms. Banquets and incense have faded, only the hum of cicadas remains. In this moment, you're not a trespasser, you're a confidant to one of history's most whispered romances. You brush a stray reed aside and find a weathered tablet wedged against a stone bench. Its surface bears a half-eroded dedication to the goddess Hathor, patron of love and joy. Beneath her dance-framed image, two names appear in a flowing princess's hand, the other scrawled in hurried scribe strokes. Though time has blurred the inscription, you sense the fervor etched into each line. A sudden rustle draws your attention, a pair of guards, their sandals echoing in the distance. You freeze, heart thundering, but a soft splash drowns out your panic. The lovers must have escaped to the canal's edge. You think their sandals discarded as they slip beneath bulrushes. You steal back into deeper shadows, scarabs and syllables swirling in your mind. You carry with you the first spark that ignited a love so intense it outlasted tombs and dynasties. Historians still argue whether the amulet's curse was ever activated, but one thing remains certain. This secret romance would echo through millennia, whispered by temple priests and dreamers alike. You slip from the scented hush of the royal garden and emerge onto the sandy banks of the Nile, where moonlight skitters across gentle ripples, casting silvery trails that guide your feet. You trudge through papyrus stalks so tall they loom like silent sentinels, their thin leaves whispering secrets carried on the evening breeze. It's during the 18th dynasty that Egypt enjoyed unprecedented stability. The river's flooding patterns were carefully recorded by official scribes to predict planting seasons. So you know this moonlit meeting is set against a backdrop of agricultural mastery that sustained entire civilizations. In the distance, lantern-lit feluccas drift lazily along the current passengers, lulled by the faint slap of water against hull. You remind yourself of a mainstream historical fact boat processions were a hallmark of Egyptian festivals, and even the Pharaoh would sometimes travel by river to visit distant shrines. Yet tonight, you're not tracking a royal barge, you're searching for two figures drawn by love's secret tide. A sweet musk of lotus blossoms drifts through the humid air, mingling with the faint stench of river mud. A reminder that the Nile source of life also harbors hidden dangers like crocodiles and bilharzia parasites. You wrinkle your nose at the thought. A quirky fringe tidbit insists that lovers once smeared citrus peels on their arms to mask their scent from prowling reptiles. Honestly, you suspect that's more romantic legend than practical safety tip. But hey, historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians really used citron camouflage or were simply inventing creative picnic hacks. You navigate closer to the water's edge, boots sinking into damp sand. A lone fisherman, his woven reed basket half submerged, glances up but says nothing, as if he's accustomed to midnight prowlers seeking clandestine encounters. You fight a grin, imagining the man thinking, great, another hopeless romantic stumbling into my fishing spot. Next, he'll ask where I keep the mood lighting. Ahead, you spot two figures crouched beneath a papyrus clump, an elegant princess, her linen gown shimmering like dew-kissed petals, and a lean scribe in simple yet finely pleated robes. They hold hands, fingers entwined above the water, casting dancing reflections on the river's surface. Their clandestine laughter is as soft as the buzz of desert cicadas, yet bright enough to split your own heavy thoughts. Silence tightens around you, and you close the gap, careful not to disturb a single reed. A mainstream fact surfaces under Tutankhamun's predecessors, including Amenhotep III. The royal daughters were educated in reading, writing, and administration skills, usually reserved for men. Here stands the pharaoh's daughter, reciting lines of poetry to her scribe lover in the original hieratic script, her voice lilting. Your eyes trace her slender wrist, where an emerald amulet glints, a second example of the cursed talisman. Legends claim it was carved from a meteorite that fell near Thebes, its otherworldly origin granting mystical power. A fringe story whispers that if two true hearts touch the amulet at midnight, they'll glimpse each other's past lives, though you suspect that's more tavern gossip than documented fact. Still, historians still argue whether the amulet's meteorite legend is factual or merely a later addition to spice up bedtime tales. A mosquito buzzes at your ear, and you flick it away thinking, romantic, this isn't. The princess giggles as her lover gently dips her hand into the Nile, retrieving a single lotus petal. She inhales the flower's soft fragrance, pressing it between her palms before tucking it into his sash. You almost chuckle. Nothing says secret love like stuffing watery weeds into your date's belt buckle. Their conversation drifts on the breeze. He murmurs about distant lands, Kush to the south, the Levant beyond Sinai regions he's only mapped by royal decree. She counters with court gossip. Did you know the high priest of Amun nearly refused to bless the festival last spring, claiming impure offerings? He grins, replying, I suspect he just wanted a new golden throne. You stifle a laugh, careful not to send ripples across their meeting. You notice the soft clank of metal his penknife used to carve messages into palm leaf scrolls. You recall a mainstream fact: scribes often carried small pallets of ink mixed from soot and gum, Arabic stored in hollowed lotus stems. Carrying ink on a love date seems overkill, you muse, but perhaps he's planning to etch a midnight love poem on the riverbank stones. Your foot nudges a small pebble, and it skitters against a shell. Both lovers tense, but the princess lifts a finger to her lips, signaling silence. He reaches into his robe and unfolds a slender papyrus strip, a secret letter she'd penned earlier, confessing her fear that palace intrigue would tear them apart. As she reads his words, "Your heartbeat echoes within my own bones. You feel a pang of envy for such poetic audacity." They lean closer, and in that moment, you swear the moon holds its breath. The water's reflection shimmers, splitting their faces into ghostly twins. A fringe scholar once suggested that Egyptians believed mirrored images could trap souls, a protective charm, or metaphysical law. Opinions vary. Of course, historians still argue whether reflections indeed held sacred power or were simply admired for their beauty. You rise onto your toes, straining for more, but a sudden breeze scatters papyrus seeds like tiny parachutes. The lovers themselves hasten to gather stray petals, their intimate moment slipping like water through fingers. You realize the Nile isn't just a backdrop, it's an active participant in their romance. Its rhythms mirror their own rising and falling hopes, gentle lulls followed by unexpected surges. Behind you, a guard's torch flickers along the riverbank path. You freeze, heart-hammering. The lovers' heads snap up, and you bite your tongue to keep from gasping. After a heartbeat, they rise in unison, pressing their palms together in a parting touch. She whispers, "Meet me at dawn by the western temple steps." He nods, tucking the lotus petal into her braided hair. You retreat, ducking behind a felucca's hull, just as two patrolling soldiers pass their sandals, leaving tracks in the moist sand. Your pulse settles, but remains quickened. You glance back once the princess stands alone, now watching the rippling silver path. You swear you can sense her longing echoing across the water. It's almost as if the Nile itself mourns her solitude. A final breeze stirs the reeds, carrying away your footprints. As you stand, you realize that in seeking forbidden love on the Nile's edge, you've walked the same lonesome shore that star-crossed lovers before you have tread. The river doesn't judge, it simply records each whispered vow in its eternal flow. You slip away into the night, clutching the memory of their moonlit meeting like a secret talisman of your own. Historians still argue whether this very spot inspired later romantic myths, but one thing is certain: under Egypt's silvered sky, love always finds a way, even when it must hide beneath papyrus and stars. You slip past torchlit pillars into the Pharaoh's inner court, where perfumed smoke curls toward an unseen ceiling, and you immediately feel the tension tightening like a cobra's coil. The clatter of sandals on polished limestone echoes beneath vaulted arches, interrupted only by hushed whispers among gold-adorned advisors. You trudge forward, heart-thudding, as each flicker of candlelight catches the glint of daggers at their waists, symbols of political power, not imminent violence, hopefully. A mainstream historical fact anchors you under Amenhotep III. The offices of vizier and high priest often jockeyed for supremacy, the former overseeing administration and the latter wielding spiritual authority. These men in flowing robes and heavy collars held more sway than any military commander. Tonight they conspire to quash a romance that threatens their delicate balance of influence. You brush dust from a stone bench and settle beside a carved lion's paw. The air smells of frankincense and heated incense, a combination that gives you a headache, but also oddly reminds you of birthday candles. You notice curled papyrus scrolls tied with crimson ribbons piled high on a low table, musty documents detailing land grants, tax codes, and most importantly, the admonitions against any liaison involving royal blood. A wizened advisor, his silver beard braided with turquoise beads, leans close and murmurs. The princess's heart flutters at the scribe's poetry, but the kingdom's pulse beats stronger without scandal. His cracked voice ricochets in your ears like an ill-tuned lute. You wrinkle your nose at the imagery, nothing like being compared to palace plumbing to dampen a mood. You recall a quirky fringe tidbit. Some fringe scribes swore that the princess once sent secret messages hidden inside beeswax tablets, which melted under sunlight, revealing coded love notes in yellow-hued wax. Certainly dramatic, but you suspect beeswax lovers risk stings far more than detection. Still, you can't help but picture a guard clapping his hand unknowingly to his brow and yelping, "Traitor, the queen's bees are rebelling." Of course, historians still argue whether beeswax coating ever existed or was simply a later romantic embellishment. Leaning forward, you glimpse an ivory box etched with palm fronds. Its lid is ajar, revealing a small vial of dark liquid poison. Perfume. An aphrodisiac. A mainstream fact surfaces courtiers sometimes carried perfumed oils, infused with myrrh or cinnamon, to curry favor, while poisoning was more often associated with rival dynasties than domestic intrigue. Your pulse quickens as you imagine the possibilities courting death with a single drop, or courting the princess with a fragrant accent. A second advisor, his voice low and measured, slams a fist on the table. Sand trickles from between his fingers, each grain sounding like a tick of a royal timepiece. We cannot allow weakening of the dynasty, he hisses. A true pharaoh must remain unchallenged, even from within his own bloodline. You shiver as the phrase settles within his own bloodline, like a dagger coated in honey. You press your hand against the cold stone floor and notice faint red ochre stains, possibly wine, possibly dried pomegranate juice. The court's feasts were legendary main courses of roasted fowl, sweet figs, and honey cakes. You imagine a forgotten banquet where advisors plotted between mouthfuls of stuffed goose. Maybe that fringe rumor about scribes slipping messages into figs isn't so far-fetched. Above you, painted lotus blossoms twist across the domed ceiling. Their colors have faded over centuries, but you can still pick out ultramarine blues sourced from lapis lazuli, imported all the way from Afghanistan, a mainstream historical fact that underscores Egypt's vast trade networks. Think about it, an advisor wearing lapis beads probably toasted the downfall of any rogue romance with a goblet of Nubian wine. The whispered plotting intensifies. You hear references to a midnight revelation that would shame the princess before the court. You can almost taste the sour tang of betrayal, a sharp counterpoint to the sweet incense. You sniff the air, catching a hint of stale beer fermented from barley, and wince. Beer in the bloodline of a royal, it's sacrilege. Suddenly the head vizier stands and begins pacing, his heavy sandals striking sparks on the heated stone. He strokes his beard longer than a desert wind squirrel's tail, and his voice booms. We shall present proof of indiscretion at tomorrow's council. The amulet of Ra will be declared cursed, and her lover exiled. You cringe. Invoking Ra's name is never taken lightly. You grip the edge of the bench fingernails, biting into cool stone. You recall that some fringe scholars speculated the curse was a fabricated myth invented by priests to manipulate public sentiment, mere theater, to justify political purges. But again, historians still argue whether the curse was a genuine ancient belief or a later retrospective invention by chroniclers. As the court's mood darkens, the candle flames gutter, casting dancing shadows that twist like Pharaoh's serpents. You feel a bead of sweat slip down your temple, either from fear or the oppressive heat. You glance at the ivory box again. The vial within pulses with dark promise. You can't decide if it holds a love potion or poison, maybe both. A valet enters carrying a brass dish of figs and salted fish. The advisors ignore the snacks, but you swipe a fig when no one's looking, biting into its fleshy sweetness. Juices trickle down your wrist, sticky and cold against your skin. You shiver at the sensation. Nothing like a bit of clandestine snacking to remind you you're alive. And possibly liable for regicide. The head vizier clears his throat. Scribes, he declares, have you prepared the transcripts of their secret meetings, the carved scarabs, the hidden scrolls. Present them now, and we shall expose the truth. A tall court scribe steps forward, unrolling a yellowed papyrus bearing a hastily scrawled love poem. The words shimmer faintly under torchlight. My heart kneels before your laughter, like desert sands before the wind. You swallow hard, it's almost beautiful enough to risk everything. A second scroll unfolds. This one lists temple donations in the princess's name gifts to Hathor's temple. A deliberate attempt to bolster her spiritual influence, you realize. A mainstream fact resurfaces royal donations to temples, often served as both piety and political maneuver, strengthening alliances with powerful priesthoods. Here, the princess's generosity becomes evidence of sedition, an act of power, rather than devotion. Gasps ripple through the advisors. You hear one mutter, "She seeks to usurp divine favor." Another hisses, "She courts the hearts of men to undermine the state." And you can't help but think love is a dangerous currency. As torches flicker low, the head vizier pronounces, "She shall stand trial before the sun god's oracle at dawn." You feel a cold knot tighten in your gut. The lover's fate hangs by a thread, spun from gossip, politics, and fear. You rise, pressing your hands to your chest to steady a racing heart. You've witnessed the machinery of royal disapproval, an elaborate clockwork of accusation, performance, and ritual. You slip away into a neighboring corridor, leaving advisors to their scheming voices receding into murmurs. A desert breeze whistles through a cracked window, carrying with it the faint scent of date wine from distant stores. You remind yourself that tomorrow at the break of dawn, everything could change. Worlds could crumble, hearts could shatter, and legends could be born. You vanish into the palace's labyrinthine corridors, scarabs and whispered threats swirling in your mind. Historians still argue whether this midnight plotting truly occurred in Amenhotep's reign or was later projected onto his court for dramatic effect. But one thing is certain in ancient Egypt, royal disapproval was a far more potent curse than any talisman could hope to conjure. You slip into a hushed gallery of the palace's private chambers, where walls are lined with polished alabaster and niches hold delicate statues of Bastet the cat goddess, her feline eyes gleaming like stolen secrets. You trudge forward, each footstep softened by woven reed mats, and spot a low wooden table strewn with tiny artifacts, amulets, beads, and most precious of all the hidden tokens of this star-crossed affair. A mainstream historical fact anchors you scarab beetle amulets were among the most common charms in ancient Egypt, symbolizing rebirth and protection. But these aren't ordinary scarabs. You kneel heart fluttering and pick up the first one, jade green, intricately carved with two interlocking hearts on its underbelly, the fine lines filled with gold leaf. The craftsmanship rivals that of the royal workshops in Memphis itself. A quirky fringe tidbit whispers in your ear. Some say that during harvest festivals, lovers would exchange scarabs soaked overnight in honey wine, believing the sweetness would bind their souls. You sniff at this idea, sticky honey wine climbing between your fingers, but you must admit the notion has a certain poetic allure. And, of course, historians still argue whether honey-soaked tokens were ever used, or if this was simply a later folktale spun by romantics. Beside the jade scarab lies another token, a tiny clay tablet, no larger than a fingernail, stamped with a single hieroglyph, the sign for beloved. You run your fingertip across its edge, feeling the indentation left by a scribe's reed stylus. This is definitely not a merchant's wear. It's too personal, too precise. You tuck it into your robe pocket, careful not to crumple its fragile surface. A scented candle flickers nearby its flame, struggling against the faint draft that courses through the gallery's open lattice window. The wax drips, leaving tiny amber droplets on the wooden floor. You recall a mainstream fact: Egyptians often added frankincense and myrrh resin to their candles, believing the smoke carried prayers to the gods. In this context, the candle's gentle smoke feels like an offering to Hathor herself, guardian of love. Your eyes wander to a slender papyrus scroll fastened with a crimson cord. You unroll it, revealing a poem penned in the princess's elegant hand. I carve your name in the hollow of my heart, where sand and sorrow find no part. May our souls entwine beyond the Nile's might, and shadows shelter us through endless night. Your breath catches. It's a mainstream historical fact that royal women were educated in writing hieratic script, but here, the princess's flourish betrays a depth of emotion words rarely capture. You roll the scroll back reverently and slip it into your satchel. A soft rustle behind you makes you spin. A palace cat, its sleek black coat nearly invisible in the dim light, winds between your feet. You remember a fringe detail: cats were believed to guard secrets, and lovers sometimes whispered confessions into a cat's ear, trusting the animal to keep silent. You crouch, offering a gentle pat, and smirk at the thought of your own secrets being safe with this shadowy guardian. But you recall, historians still argue whether cats were truly confidants of lovers or merely worshipped for pest control. Moving to the far end of the table, you find a tiny silver mirror, its handle shaped like a papyrus stalk. You lift it, and your reflection shimmers amid the palace gloom. But etched faintly on the back is a pair of wings, symbolic of the goddess Maat, emblem of truth and balance. You wonder if this mirror was meant for the princess to glimpse her own inner strength, or for the scribe to see the goddess's favor reflected in her eyes. A breeze stirs the curtain at the open gallery door, carrying the soft hum of court musicians tuning their lyres for an upcoming feast. You tuck the mirror into your pack, along with the scarab and the clay tablet, your personal trove of forbidden love souvenirs. You pause to consider the broader context. Such tokens weren't mere trinkets. A mainstream historical fact reminds you that amulets and keepsakes often served as legal pledges in marriage contracts, binding parties to their word under divine witness. Here, the scarab and clay sign tilt the scales in favor of a union, if only the political will existed to acknowledge it. Your skin prickles as the sound of approaching footsteps echoes down the corridor. A well-trained guard strides past, spear in hand, eyes scanning the gallery. You press yourself flat against the alabaster wall, heart pounding as the man pauses mere inches away. He glances at the artifacts, brow furrowed, but moves on without a word. You exhale slowly, fingers trembling as you rearrange the tokens inside your satchel. You rise, brushing reed fibers from your robes, and take one last look at the gallery. A mainstream fact surfaces: palace workshops employed artisans of many backgrounds, Nubian sculptors, Levantine jewelers, reflecting Egypt's cosmopolitan reach. Yet these tokens feel singular, their dual artistry a testament to two hearts daring to combine cultures and statuses. As you make for the exit, you notice a final keepsake tucked behind a bronze statuette of Anubis, a delicate wreath of dried lotus petals bound with thread. You lift it carefully. The petals are brittle, but their shape endures. You recall a fringe notion that lovers inhaled the scent of lotus to induce shared dreams, visions of past lives spent together. Taking a deep breath through your mask, you let a faint trace of floral aroma drift past your nostrils. Almost instantly, you feel a momentary sense of calm, as if you're glimpsing another timeline where this romance is known and blessed. You step back into the corridor, satchel heavy with tokens of devotion. You close your eyes and silently vow to safeguard these relics, for they bear witness to a love that defied politics, religion, and the gods themselves. A torch flickers, illuminating your path, and you trudge onward, scarabs and verses clutched close. In the echo of your footsteps, you swear you can still hear the princess's whisper. These tokens are our hearts in form, carry them true. You slip into the palace's winding passages, tokens, secured mind buzzing with the weight of their significance. Historians still argue whether any such trinkets were ever recovered from royal tombs, or if they remain buried beneath layers of sand and time. But here in your possession, they live on silent testaments to a secret love that dared to carve its story into history's heart. You emerge into a secluded alcove beyond the harem's veiled corridors, where the air is thick with incense, and the amber glow of oil lamps casts dancing shadows on sandstone walls. You trudge forward on worn cobblestones, heart-pounding, as you anticipate the moment the cursed amulet will finally reveal its true nature. A mainstream historical fact grounds you: emeralds were treasured in ancient Egypt. Cleopatra herself famously adorned her crown with them, believing they embodied the verdant life of the Nile's fields. Yet this amulet, fashioned from a single flawless emerald, seems to pulse with something beyond mere gemological value. Resting on a carved stone pedestal draped in crimson silk lies the amulet, a teardrop-shaped emerald encased in gold filigree, set above a tiny loop designed for a chain. The gold surrounding the gem is inscribed with hieroglyphs invoking Thoth, god of wisdom, and Sekhmet, goddess of healing and wrath. You swallow hard as you brush your fingertips across the cool gold, feeling a faint vibration beneath your fingertips. A quirky fringe tidbit whispers through your mind. Some villagers claim that if two true lovers each kissed opposite sides of the emerald at midnight, they would unlock a vision of a past life in which they had been reunited before. You half expect to see ghostly specters swirling around you, but instead, all you sense is the steady drip of oil from a nearby lamp. Still, historians still argue whether such kiss-activated visions ever featured in genuine Egyptian lore or were later romantic embellishments. You lean closer, eyes tracing the delicate glyphs. Your breath catches when one symbol, a coiled uraeus serpent, seems to shift in the lamplight as though alive. You blink, and it remains static, but your pulse races at the suggestion of a living curse. You recall a mainstream fact: worshippers believed the uraeus protected the pharaoh by spitting fire at his enemies. Here it guards the lovers' bond, perhaps ready to strike any who dare separate them. A soft hum resonates in the air, almost like a distant chant. You press a finger to your lips, urging silence, and realize the hum is your own heartbeat echoing in the alcove's stillness. You dip your head, murmuring thanks to Sekhmet for not unleashing her fury upon you yet. You lift the amulet carefully, gold chained, slipping through your fingers. It feels surprisingly light, but an unexpected warmth floods through the tiny emerald. You jerk your hand back, clutching the amulet to your chest, as if it might bite. The warm sensation diffuses, leaving a gentle pulse like a slow drumbeat in your palm. A breeze stirs the silk cloth, and you notice etchings on the reverse side, names perhaps scratched in hurried strokes, the princesses and the scribes intertwined by a looping line. Beneath their names is a date carved in lunar cycles, year 38, month 2, day 15. You wrinkle your brow. Mainstream historians date Amenhotep III's 38th regnal year to roughly 1350 BCE, underscoring the artifact's authenticity. Your mind drifts to a quirky notion you once read that the amulet's emerald was sourced from Cleopatra's legendary mines in the eastern desert, a chronological impossibility by centuries, but a tasty rumor nonetheless. You smirk, pressing the gem to your lips as if to test its taste. It's cool metallic and gives no hint of desert dust. Yet historians still argue whether the eastern desert emerald mines were exploited continuously or fell into disuse between dynasties. You twist the amulet in your fingers, and a faint inscription you previously missed becomes clear, bound by love, freed by truth. You murmur the words and shiver as if the amulet itself has whispered back. What truth could release its bond? You suspect honesty in the face of the Pharaoh's wrath, perhaps the princess's confession at dawn. The alcove's stone tiles suddenly feel colder. A candle guttering nearby flickers wildly, like a candle caught in an invisible wind. You straighten heart-hammering and realize you're not alone. A low voice, distant but unmistakable, echoes in your ears. Only the pure of heart may wield such power. You spin, but the alcove is empty save for the silent emerald in your palm. A mainstream historical fact surfaces to steady you. Amulets were often consecrated by priests in temple rituals imbued with spells to protect their wearers. This one, however, feels more than protective, it feels sentient. You slip the amulet into the inner pouch of your tunic, the fabric brushing against the smooth gold. Immediately, the warmth returns, a reassuring thrum that seems to echo your own pulse. You draw in a breath, noticing a faint aroma of lotus oil lingering on the gem, perhaps residue from the princess's fingertips. A distant murmur ripples through the palace corridors, footsteps approaching. You press yourself against the cold wall, one hand still on the amulet. A sentinel clad in polished bronze armor steps into the alcove, torch held high. The guard's face is stern, eyes sharp. He scans the room, eyes flicking to where the amulet once rested on the pedestal. Your heart throbs like a war drum. You force yourself to meet his gaze, expression calm. He hesitates, steps forward, then kneels to inspect a cluster of candle drippings. You exhale slowly. He stands and moves on, oblivious to your presence. You risk a glance at the amulet pouch. Its warmth has subsided to a gentle glow against your chest. You slip from the alcove, footsteps soft on the cobblestone. In the corridor's hush, you cradle the amulet as if it were a fragile bird. You recall a fringe claim that when separated from love's true touch, the amulet would seep tears, tiny droplets of emerald green resin, but you find no sign of such weeping. Still, historians still argue whether references to an emerald weeping amulet appear in ancient records or stem from medieval legend. Padding down dimly lit halls, you pass elaborately carved doors depicting pharaohs trampling enemies beneath their sandaled feet. You wonder if any have ever seen the amulet's face shimmer, with tears metaphorical or literal, at the thought of lost love. You slip around a corner and descend a narrow stone staircase, the amulet's weight grounding you. Reaching the bottom, you enter a cool corridor lined with stacked clay jars of wine. You pause, eyeing a jug marked Harvest of Year 37. Temptation flickers. You could share a sipped victory with this relic, but you resist. The amulet's secret is not for idle celebration. You continue deeper into the palace's underbelly, descending until you reach a simple wooden door. Beyond it lies your safe room, hidden behind woven rugs and stacked crates of embroidered linens. You slip inside, closing the door quietly and pressing your back to its oak grain. Once the corridor's echoes fade, you hastily drape the amulet across a silken pillow on a small alcove shelf. It glints softly emerald heart, beating in the semi-darkness. You kneel, forefinger tracing the gold filigree, promising, "I'll keep you safe, even if the world demands your destruction." A final whisper brushes your ear, as if the amulet itself speaks. Love's bond cannot be severed by mortal decree. You close your eyes, letting the words settle like gentle sand around your thoughts. You rise, stepping back into the lamplit calm of your secret chamber heart, still thrumming from the amulet's touch. Historians still argue whether any such emerald amulet was ever found in the royal tombs, or if it exists solely in the realm of legend. But here, in your possession, it breathes its own story, one you vow to protect at all costs. You step back into the palace's brighter corridors, where banners of blue and gold flutter in anticipation of Luxor's annual festival, a celebration so lavish that the Nile's banks themselves seem to glow. You trudge past columns dripping with garlands of fresh palm fronds and jasmine, their scent mingling with the rich smoke of burning frankincense. Historians still argue whether this festival originated under Amenhotep III or his successors, but every year thousands flock to witness its pageantry and partake in its secret tryst. A mainstream historical fact anchors you: the Luxor festival, known as the Feast of Opet-honored Amun, and celebrated the pharaoh's divine rejuvenation, featuring boat processions between Karnak and Luxor Temple. In that grand parade, the royal barge glided along the Nile, priests chanted hymns, and the air pulsed with rhythmic drumming. Tonight, though, you're not watching gods pass by, you're searching for two mortal hearts hiding amid the revelry. You weave through a bustling courtyard where acrobats leap over flickering torches, their silhouettes flickering against temple walls. A quirky fringe tidbit drifts in your thoughts. Some travelers claimed that lovers once disguised themselves as performers, hiding messages in juggling pins or embedding love notes inside tumblers' cups. You can't help but smirk at the idea of someone popping a juggling pin open midair to reveal, "Meet me by the Sphinx at midnight." Though clearly historians still argue whether such acrobatic espionage ever happened or belongs purely to romantic folklore. Drums beat steadily overhead as you approach a makeshift stage where musicians tune their lutes and tambourines. The princess, dressed in festival finery, her linen robes dyed with saffron's golden hue and embroidered with tiny lotus patterns, moves among the dancers like a shimmering reed in a breeze. She laughs too freely, eyes bright with mischief, and you recall how earlier she'd whispered that the amulet you carried warmed her palm whenever she thought of her lover. You feel the tiny bulge against your chest and offer the amulet a protective caress just in case. Your path is blocked momentarily by a troupe of masked dancers, their movements sinuous and hypnotic. You trudge through the swirling skirts of painted silks and spot the scribe on the far side, crouched near a powdered stone mixing bowl. He's blending vivid pigments, blue made from ground azurite, red from crushed cinnabar, to paint festival masks. Mainstream fact: Egyptian artisans indeed used mineral pigments in cosmetics and ceremonial face paint, believing such colors honored the gods. Here, that tradition doubles as a covert canvas for identity concealment. You edge closer, ducking behind a wooden pillar carved with scenes of Nubian tribute bearers. The scribe brushes a streak of cerulean blue across his own cheek, then extends the brush to the princess, who steps forward, giggling like a flute's trill. She accepts the brush with a playful grin and paints a little scarab beneath her eye, a callback to the tokens you found earlier, then brushes a dot of red on his forehead. The effect is intimate, like a secret code only they share. A chilling breeze whispers through the courtyard, though no wind should reach here. You shiver, remembering the candle's odd flicker in the alcove and the amulet's voice promising that love's bond cannot be severed. You press your hand to your tunic, feeling the emerald's gentle pulse as a reminder of whose side you're on. Nearby, a merchant hawks trays of sweet honey cakes and crisp figs while children chase each other beneath dripping garlands. You seize a honey cake, taking a discreet bite. The sticky sweetness coats your tongue, and you mutter, "Nothing says clandestine romance like sugar overload," but only a passing guard hears you and raises an eyebrow. You swallow fast, hoping the guard believes you're just another festival goer with an unhealthy dessert habit. You catch the princess glancing around, scanning the crowd, until her eyes lock with yours. She lifts an eyebrow and beckons. You trudge over, weaving past a cluster of temple priests in leopard skin cloaks, their faces solemn beneath ostrich feather headdresses. A mainstream historical fact drifts by priests of Amun were among the wealthiest and most politically powerful men in Egypt, their influence rivaling even the viziers. If they spot her here, you all risk more than scorn. "Good," she whispers as you join them behind a row of marble balustrades. "We need to slip inside the Karnak precinct before the obelisks are lit." Her voice is soft but urgent, and you feel the familiar thrill of an audience with destiny. The scribe steps closer, offering you both a small clay cup of date wine. You sip gratefully. Its fermented sweetness is warming, though it carries a faint bite of acidity that reminds you of damp cellar stones. "Thank the gods for grape shortages," you joke quietly, earning a suppressed chuckle from the princess. Behind you, huge torches ignite along the grand avenue, illuminating towering obelisks carved with hieroglyphs praising the pharaoh's victories. Golden light spills across the courtyard, transforming every surface into a sea of molten brass. You realize the festival of Opet is at its peak, but under this brilliance, secrets can vanish as easily as shadows. The princess glances at the amulet's pouch under your cloak. "Are you certain it's safe?" she asks, eyes flickering with concern. You nod, recalling how the emerald wept no resin when she last touched it, and how its warmth steadied her when dread threatened to overwhelm. You murmur, "It's ours, no priest can glimpse its glow." She smiles, though worry lingers in her eyes. "Then let's keep it that way." You follow the scribe through a narrow stone corridor past grand columns where lotus capitals gleam in torchlight. Each footstep echoes like a distant drum, and you realize the palace itself seems to be holding its breath. A breeze stirs powdered incense above hidden altars, reminding you how close you are to risking divine wrath. Finally, you reach a low doorway leading into the inner precincts of Karnak. Beyond, an inner sanctum awaits its walls, rumored to contain secret chambers known only to the high priest. There, the scribe whispers, pointing to a barely visible glyph, a marker indicating a hidden entrance beneath a loose stone. You kneel and press your fingers to its edge. It gives way with a quiet click. You slip inside first, followed by the princess, and then the scribe. The hidden passage is cool and dark, its walls slick with moisture. You trudge forward, each step sounding hollow. A mainstream historical fact echoes some hidden temple corridors led to subterranean chapels where kings and priests communed with Amun-Ra away from the public eye. Tonight, that secrecy shields forbidden lovers instead of crowned heads. A soft chime resonates ahead like distant bells in sleep. You shiver, recalling the fringe rumor that the amulet reacts to long-forgotten temple bells, tiny vibrations reactivating its ancient magic. You press a finger to your ear, but it's only water dripping from overhead stones. Still, historians still argue whether any acoustic traps adorn temple passageways, or if those tales are later inventions to enchant tourists. At the passage's end, you emerge into a quiet chamber lined with sandstone benches and painted reliefs of gods granting blessings. Torches flicker in sconces carved like lotus blooms, casting a warm glow that feels almost protective. The princess steps forward, reaching into her sash to retrieve a folded scroll. She unfolds it, revealing a lyric you haven't heard before. "Our souls entwined beneath sandstone and flame, no edict can sever Amun's silent acclaim." She offers it to her scribe, who places a gentle kiss on her hand before pressing the paper to the amulet's loop. A soft hum vibrates through the chamber as he ties the scroll around the emerald sealing love's vow in both word and token. You watch heartful as the amulet's green glow intensifies for a heartbeat, then settles into a gentle emerald haze. The princess closes her eyes, breathing deeply, and you swear you hear her whisper, "This bond is stronger than any curse." You lean back against the wall, letting the weight of their devotion wash over you. 3 light jokes drift into your mind about honey-soaked scarabs, date wine hangovers, and rogue acrobats, reminding you that even in the gravest of moments, a little levity keeps the heart alive. As you slip back the stone to conceal the doorway, you carry with you the echo of torchlit blessings and hidden vows. The festival of Opet thrives above, but here in sacred silence, true devotion shines brighter than any temple lamp. Historians still argue whether lovers truly shared such clandestine sanctuaries beneath Karnak's stones, but after tonight, you'll believe in the power of hidden love, stronger than divine decree. You slip through an ornately carved door into the inner harem quarters, where gauzy curtains of pastel silk sway in a light breeze, and the air is perfumed with rose water and jasmine oil. You trudge along a narrow marble corridor, lined with bronze lamps, each flame flickering as if sharing secrets in hushed tones. The faint murmur of women's voices drifts through latticed windows, sewing a tapestry of gossip that tickles your ears like a playful breeze. A mainstream historical fact steadies you: royal harems in the 18th dynasty were more than mere pleasure houses. They served as centers of education, artistry, and political maneuvering, populated by princesses, priestesses, and high-born attendants. Here, alliances were forged as deftly as threads on a loom. Tonight, you're not an intruder. You're part of the palace's living tapestry, woven into its most intimate confidences. As you pass a basin of cool water, carved from basalt, into which attendants drop rose petals for leisurely foot baths, you overhear one voice crack with excitement. Did you hear? The princess stole away with her scribe to the temple's hidden crypt beneath Luxor. Another scoffs, foolish girl, no one escapes the pharaoh's gaze. You smile at the drama. Palace life, you remind yourself, often outshines any stage theater in Thebes. A quirky fringe tidbit dances through your mind. Some courtiers believed that if a woman whispered her lover's name 3 times into a copper mirror, the image would morph into his face for a fleeting moment, a sort of proto-video chat. You wrinkle your nose at the thought, imagine the foul copper aftertaste, but you must admit proto-video chat has a certain vintage charm. Still, historians still argue whether mirror scrying rituals were ever practiced or if they're later inventions by storytellers. You pause before a low divan draped in violet silk and press a finger to your lips. Nearby, 2 attendants lounge on embroidered cushions, their hands busy weaving fresh garlands of jasmine and lotus. You catch snippets. The high priest warns the curse will bloom at dawn, murmurs one. And I heard the scribe's mother tried to bribe a guard with honeyed figs to smuggle them. Scrolls, replies the other. Their voices drop to conspiratorial whispers like sparrows fluttering among papyrus fronds. Leaning closer, you inhale the scent of heated plaster mixed with incense, an oddly comforting reminder that even palaces sweat. A mainstream fact surfaces: palace walls were often coated with a plaster of limestone and gypsum, then painted with vivid scenes using mineral pigments. These pigments gave life to frescoes of dancers and deities, but here they're fading beneath centuries of whispered intrigue. You trail your fingertips along a low table where brightly colored cosmetics sit in alabaster pots, crushed malachite green and powdered galena black used for kohl eyeliner. An attendant passes painting another's lids in a flourish, so precise it could grace the finest temple relief. You recall a fringe detail. Some insiders claim that the princess once dabbed kohl, laced with secret herbal sedatives, on her scribe's eyelids, so he'd dream of her under guard, in effect a botanical lullaby. You arch an eyebrow. Dosage aside, you can't help but think, sedative eyeliner. I'll have to try that in my next bedtime routine. Of course, historians still argue whether any records attest to herbal-infused kohl or if it's pure palace fantasy. A soft laugh ripples through the quarter's tiled floor, delicate as spun gold. You follow the sound and spy a circle of young noblewomen reclining on silk mats, passing around a shallow bowl of sweet date syrup. They each dip slender fingers into the syrup, then press tiny droplets onto miniature love letters. One slips her letter into the folds of a silk sash. Another presses hers into a cigarette lotus blossom before dropping it into a brazier to send secret smoke signals. You fight a grin, recalling that you once tried smoke signals at a desert camp and ended up signaling a herd of startled goats instead. Beyond them, an older woman, a former royal tutor, paces quietly, her richly embroidered robe swirling like water. She murmurs to herself, power and love, bound in scarabs and spells, yet one wrong step, and all is lost. A mainstream fact flickers to mind. Royal tutors often doubled as political advisors, their lessons blending arithmetic with statecraft. In the harem, education came wrapped in veils of diplomacy. The tutor's muttered mantra strikes you as less academic lecture and more heartfelt warning. You slip behind a carved screen to avoid a passing guard and catch your reflection for a moment in a polished bronze mirror. Your hair, pinned up with lotus-shaped combs, feels heavy from the evening's humidity. You wipe a bead of sweat from your temple, smudging a faint green streak of malachite coal, your accidental war paint, in this quiet battle for secrets. Near the corridor's end, a tapestry depicting Hathor's cow-headed visage hangs overhead, her gentle eyes carved into wool threads. Beneath her gaze, two young concubines sit in a semicircle, their song soft as lullabies. They hum lyrics praising love's sweet torment, their voices weaving like silk threads around your senses. You lean in, catching the words, "Heart of emerald, bind me tight," through sand and shadow, day and night. You recognize the tune. It's been circulating in hushed whispers across the palace for days. A fringe rumor suggests this melody was composed by the scribe himself, a nocturnal serenade recorded only on fragile papyrus that vanished after the first performance. You smile at the notion of a composer prince of the heart, though you think musical papyri rarely survive Egypt's arid tombs, so who's to say? Yet historians still argue whether any musical notations for love songs have ever existed or if they belong to romantic myth. A soft breeze flows through a latticed window, carrying with it the scent of night-blooming datra, a flower said to induce vivid dreams. You inhale carefully. The perfume is heady and sweet, laced with a subtle bitterness. You imagine the princess breathing it in to dream of her lover, but you decide it's probably best reserved for warding off insomnia rather than inciting hallucinatory romance. You move on each step, guided by the tapestry's gentle hum. Ahead, a younger attendant scrawls tiny runes on a clay shell, an amulet she plans to slip into the princess's bath to bolster her courage before the dawn trial. You catch her name, Nesikonsu, and exchange a quick nod. She flushes, dropping the shell. You bend to help pick it up and feel the weight of her trust in that fleeting gesture. Outside the tutor's chamber, the muffled thump of a heart-slab drum signals the late-hour curfew approaching. The concubines hasten to their cushions, smoothing their robes as if they've never whispered a word of treason. You pause at the doorway, taking in one last glimpse of the harem's inner sanctum, its cushions, its coal-lined eyes, its lanterns casting quarter-moon shadows. You tuck away the clay shell stained with both ranting runes and Nesikonsu's shaky handwriting. It feels like a prayer in your pocket, a small hope that love may yet prevail over politics and priestly power. You trace the carved scrollwork on the doorframe, tiny lotus buds and papyrus stems, and remind yourself how easily love's fragility can be hidden beneath the weight of stone. As you retreat, you almost stumble over a discarded sandal, one of the princesses you suspect abandoned in haste. You slip it onto your foot, careful not to damage its delicate straps, and pad silently back toward the palace's inner maze. The sandal fits oddly loose, like a borrowed burden, reminding you that you carry more than just tokens. You carry the weight of every whispered hope in this silk-draped world. Outside the harem's gilded gateway, the scent of jasmine lingers like a promise. You pause, inhaling deeply, and give a silent nod to the countless women whose voices echo in woven walls. You step back into the corridor beyond sandal in hand, ready to bring news of these whispered confidences to the princess and her scribe, because in the hush of the harem, every secret is a seed, and you're the gardener tending forbidden blooms. You slip away from the perfumed hush of the harem and navigate twisting corridors carved from sandstone so fine it almost gleams in the torchlight. Each corner feels like a crossroads of intrigue, every carved relief a silent witness to scheming and stolen glances. You trudge onward until you reach the marker. You memorized a disguised hieroglyph of a kneeling ibis etched on a pillar. Beneath its winged curve lies the hidden latch to the secret passage. A mainstream historical fact steadies you ancient Egyptian architects often embedded false doors and concealed corridors within temple complexes and palaces to protect tombs and treasures from tomb robbers. Tonight, that ingenuity shields forbidden lovers rather than priceless relics. You press the ibis's downstroke, and the panel slides open with a barely audible whisper. Beyond is a narrow tunnel chiseled into the bedrock, its walls damp and cool. The scent of earth and ancient mortar fills your nostrils, an aroma both unsettling and strangely comforting, like the promise of buried history. A quirky fringe tidbit drifts through your mind. Some fringe explorers claimed these secret tunnels were once used by priestly cults to stage ritual dramas, complete with hidden alcoves for masked actors. You snort at the thought. Imagine priests in linen masks reenacting divine battles for an audience of scarab beetles, but historians still argue whether any theatrical rituals took place in such subterranean spaces or if those stories emerged centuries later. You trudge forward, hand trailing along the cool stone. The floor slopes gently downward, and the ceiling narrows until you must duck. Drips of water echo in the silence, each one sounding like a distant clock tick. You recall a mainstream fact: these tunnels often connected the palace to the Nile's edge, allowing discreet river access during times of crisis. Perhaps centuries ago, a king slipped through this very conduit to escape a coup, or in your case, to convey love tokens unseen. Your booted foot kicks loose a tiny pebble which skitters down the tunnel. You freeze, heart pounding. After a beat, silence returns. You allow yourself a small, wry grin. Stealth mission accomplished minus the stealth pebble. Further in the tunnel branches, an arrow-shaped glyph points left toward the river, and another points right toward the temple precinct. You remind yourself the lovers plan to use this passage to elude palace guards and reach the temple for a private blessing. They risked divine disfavor, but hope carried them as surely as sandals on stone. You follow the temple arrow, ducking under a low lintel into a secondary shaft lined with niches. Each niche holds a small oil lamp, long since extinguished, but you sense their original purpose: to guide secret pilgrims or conspirators through the winding labyrinth. A mainstream fact surfaces: lamp-lit forks in royal tunnel complexes helped workers transport heavy stone blocks during construction, later repurposed for clandestine movement. Your fingers brush against a carved symbol, a lotus bud, enclosed within a stylized eye. You trace its curve, wondering if it served as a silent signature of the lovers who walked here before you. You press it gently, and a faint click echoes. A section of wall slides aside, revealing a cramped chamber. Inside, you discover an unexpected treasure trove, bundles of small scrolls tied with white linen strips, each inscribed in honey-hued ink. You kneel and unbind one, revealing a detailed map of the palace's corridors and adjacent temple grounds drawn with impeccable precision. A bird's-eye view, annotated in hieratic script: secret route to Hathor's shrine, guard rotations, moonrise shadow windows. A fringe rumor flits through your thoughts. Some believe the map was drawn by a hander in the dark, a clandestine group of palace insiders opposed to the princess's plight, hoping to reveal her treason. You raise an eyebrow at the irony. A map intended to expose becomes a map of escape. Historians still argue whether any such maps ever existed or whether they're the stuff of novelists' dreams. You tuck the scroll into your satchel and lift another bundle. This one holds tiny clay tokens stamped with the princess's seal, a lotus within a cartouche. These tokens probably granted passage through secret checkpoints trusted only by her inner circle. You pocket one, thinking it might serve you well if you need to bluff your way past a guard. A soft breeze drifts through a fissure in the stone, unexpected in a sealed tunnel. You sniff. The air carries a faint scent of lotus oil mixed with damp moss. You smile, recalling a fringe tale that some tunnels were irrigated by redirected spring water to maintain humidity, and inadvertently to grow tiny lotus blossoms in hidden grottos. You peer along the damp crack, but find only bare rock. Yet historians still argue whether any subterranean gardens existed beneath the palace, or if those stories grew from overactive imaginations. You stand brushing dust from your robes and notice a narrow archway at the far end of the chamber, framed by two broken alabaster statues of Anubis. You press forward, boots echoing in the tighter shaft beyond. The air grows cooler, still almost chilly. and you wrap your arms around yourself, half expecting to feel the brush of ghostly linen robes. Footsteps ring out ahead, deliberate slow. Your pulse quickens. You press against the wall, heart hammering. A guard's silhouette emerges, torch in hand. He pauses at the chamber entrance, whispers a phrase you can't make out, then steps inside. Your breath hitches. You must act quickly. Recalling one of the clay tokens you pocketed, you slip it into view and murmur, "Passage for the princess's envoy." The guard's gaze flicks to the token, its lotus seal catching torchlight. He nods once, stepping aside without a word. You exhale, sliding past him as he turns his back, engrossed in scanning the scrolls. Once you clear him, you sprint, careful to keep to muted footsteps down the final stretch of tunnel. The passage opens into a shallow grotto where pale moonlight filters through a concealed shaft, above illuminating a pool of still water fed by unseen springs. You pause, eyes adjusting to the surreal scene. Delicate ferns brush against carved stone, and tiny lotus blossoms float on the surface. A mainstream historical fact anchors you Egyptians often decorated private shrines with water features to evoke the primeval waters of creation, symbolizing rebirth and renewal. Here, that symbolism takes on new meaning, a rebirth of love against all odds. You step carefully across the grotto's stone slabs, feeling the cool mist on your skin. The pool's surface reflects the stars above a midday sky captured underground. You clasp your hands and whisper a silent prayer to Hathor, whose blessings the lovers so desperately sought. Beyond the grotto, the tunnel slopes upward, and you follow it until you emerge at the base of a moonlit obelisk in the temple courtyard. The scent of night-blooming flowers surrounds you, datura jasmine, and the faint sweetness of honeyed myrrh. You realize you've arrived at the lovers' intended destination just as they once did maybe centuries ago. You step into the courtyard, heart swelling with the weight of generations who walked this path for love and secrecy. Above, the obelisk's tip seems to pierce the starry sky, a silent witness to every vow exchanged beneath its shadow. You close your eyes and imagine the princess and her scribe standing here, hands clasped, hearts pounding as the moon casts its argent glow upon eternal stones. You offer a quiet nod to their courage, and with renewed resolve, turn to retrace your steps, maps, tokens, and whispered vows in tow, all entrusted to your care. You slip away from the obelisk's watchful presence, footprints dissolving into the ancient courtyard sand, leaving no trace but a lingering echo of love's triumph. You slip back through the moonlit courtyard, the soft crunch of sand underfoot, reminding you how easily one misstep can betray even the most careful plan. Ahead, the grand pylons of the temple cast long shadows, and you trudge toward a weathered stone bench tucked beneath a pair of weather-beaten sphinxes. Here, the lovers once paused to share a stolen embrace before vanishing into hidden corridors. A mainstream historical fact grounds you. Sphinx statues, often placed in pairs along temple avenues, served as guardians, their leonine bodies symbolizing the pharaoh's strength and divine protection. Yet tonight, these stone sentinels protect memories of a romance more scandalous than any royal edict. You settle onto the bench, careful not to dislodge centuries-old sand piled in its crevices. A quirky fringe tidbit flits through your mind. Local storytellers whisper that on nights when the moon is full, you can hear the faint echo of the lovers' laughter carried on the desert breeze. You hold your breath, listening, and for a heartbeat, you swear you catch a soft giggle swirling between the temple columns. Of course, historians still argue whether such auditory illusions are real phenomena or simply the product of expectant imaginations. As you lean back, your eyes trace the faded reliefs on the bench's stone backrest, warriors trampling enemies, lotus blooms unfurling, and a solitary figure kneeling in devotion. You recall a mainstream fact: temple reliefs were rarely repaired or repainted once completed, making this bench an authentic relic from Amenhotep III's reign. Its patterns have faded, but its story remains etched in every groove. You retrieve from your satchel 2 folded papyrus strips, love letters exchanged between the princess and her scribe. Carefully, you unroll the first and read, "My dearest, when the sun's first light kisses the dunes, I feel your warmth in every golden ray. Meet me where the Sphinx's paws rest. I shall wait until the last star fades." A soft sigh escapes your lips. You tuck the parchment away and unroll the second letter, Beloved shadows may cloak our steps, but no darkness can hide the flame between us. By the broken obelisk beneath the watchful gaze of Ra, I bind my heart to yours for all eternity. You fold them reverently and place them side by side on the bench as if to reunite the lovers' words once more. A gentle wind stirs, lifting stray grains of sand that drift across the letters like tiny dancers. Nearby, a low chant arises from hidden chantresses within the temple, an invocation to Hathor for protection and fertility. You recall that temple music often accompanied ritual offerings, mixing clashing cymbals with haunting vocal harmonies. The chant's distant resonance seems to weave through the night air, wrapping around your shoulders like a comforting shawl. You rise and wander deeper into the temple's forecourt, where massive columns soar toward the sky. Their capitals shaped like papyrus and lotus blossoms loom overhead, and you trudge between their giant stems dwarfed by millennia of carved stone. A fringe detail echoes some pilgrims believed these columns held whispers of every prayer ever offered, replaying them faintly when a breeze passed through. You pause, listening, and swear you catch a faint murmuring of ancient voices, perhaps lost prayers for love's endurance. Historians still argue whether these acoustic phenomena truly exist or are simply poetic legend. Ahead, you spot the broken obelisk mentioned in the second letter. Its shattered top lies scattered among rubble, a testament to a failed construction or deliberate defacement. Lovers once concealed within its base are said to have whispered promises that seeped into the stone. You trace a fingertip over its jagged edge and imagine their whispered vows trapped in every crack. Tucked beneath a protruding stone is a small clay seal stamped with the scribe's personal emblem, a stylized ibis in flight. You slip it into your pocket, noting how these small tokens accumulate into a map of devotion you carry with you. Beyond the obelisk, a shallow reflecting pool mirrors the star-studded sky. The water is still like a polished mirror, and you trudge to its edge. Above, a cornice of carved lotus leaves forms a frieze mainstream fact reflecting pools were designed to evoke the primordial waters of Nun, symbolizing creation and renewal. Here, that symbolism feels poignantly apt for love, reborn across centuries. You kneel and dip your hand into the cool water, watching ripples distort the sky's reflection. You whisper the princess's name and the scribe's name as though calling them through time. A single lotus petal drifts across the surface as if answering your call. You scoop it up, heart-swelling, and press it to your lips, imagining their lips pressed to the same blossom. A torchlight flickers at the far end of the courtyard. You stand brushing wet sand from your hands and realize dawn approaches. The first hints of pale light brush the horizon, softening the temple's rugged outlines. You know the lover's trial by dawn will soon begin an ordeal by divine oracle that could seal their fate forever. You gather your tokens, the letters, the clay seals, the lotus petal, and tuck them back into your satchel. Each carries a fragment of their story, a piece of their resolve. As the sky brightens, you trudge back toward the hidden tunnel entrance, the scent of dew-kissed lotus and warm sandstone guiding your path. In the soft gray light, you slip beneath the broken obelisk's base and press the hidden latch. The stone panel grinds shut behind you, sealing their legacy once more within the temple's silent heart. You pause in the darkness, feeling the cool dust beneath your knees, and vow to carry their story beyond these walls, through time and memory, ensuring that even if history forgets the princess and her scribe, you will not. Historians still argue whether these precise locations inspired later romantic legends, but as you tread back into the maze of hidden corridors, you know the power of love lies not in stone, but in the hearts that remember. You emerge from the hidden tunnel, back into the labyrinth of palace corridors, torchlight flickering against painted walls that depict pharaohs offering lotus flowers to gods. You trudge forward, careful to avoid loose shards of pottery, littering the floor shards that once clinked under hurried sandals. The air here carries a faint warmth, spiced by lingering incense from morning rituals, and you can almost taste the desert sun rising beyond these stones. A mainstream historical fact steadies you. Palace corridors were often oriented east-west, symbolizing the sun's daily journey and the king's divine renewal each dawn. As you walk toward the eastern wing, you glimpse slivers of pale light filtering through narrow window slits. Each ray illuminates specks of dust dancing like tiny papyrus seeds caught in a breeze. Your hand drifts to the satchel at your side, heavy with tokens of forbidden love. Scarabs, letters, the emerald amulet, clay seals, and lotus petals. Each keepsake feels warmer now, infused by the lover's final midnight vow. A quirky fringe tidbit surfaces. Some late antiquity writers claimed that if a lover carried enough tokens, they could summon the spirit of Hathor in dreams, though you suspect that's more bedtime story than documented ritual. Yet historians still argue whether dream incubation via love tokens ever appeared in Egyptian magical papyri or emerged later through Greco-Roman retellings. Ahead, two palace servants march past bearing trays of fresh bread and date cakes for the morning feast. You duck into a shadowed alcove as they pass the aroma of baked grains mingling with sweet honey scents. You bite back a smile. Secret missions seldom prohibit breakfast, but good luck indulging in a honey cake at dawn without royals noticing. You trudge on until you reach a small courtyard garden, dew-kissed petals glistening on low bushes of jasmine and lotus. A fountain gurgles at its center, water sourced from the Nile via concealed channels. A mainstream fact dips in Egyptian gardens often incorporated water features and shade trees to create microclimates luxuries that symbolized earthly paradise. Here, the garden's serenity belies the tensions that swirl beneath its blossoms. A stray cat pads across your path, pausing to rub against your ankle. You crouch to scratch behind its ears. The cat purrs like distant drums, and you remember the fringe belief that cats could sense impending danger. Some palace insiders swore their feline companions hissed when betrayal lurked nearby. You stroke the cat's charcoal fur and think, if only that hiss could warn us of what comes at dawn. Still, historians still argue whether cats were ever supernatural alarm systems or simply pampered pets. You rise and follow a mosaic path of colored stones leading to an arched doorway, flanked by two statues of Anuket, goddess of the Nile's cataracts. Their alabaster eyes seem to follow you, reminding you of the god's ever-watchful presence. You slip inside, entering the royal throne room, a vast hall of soaring columns and polished granite floors. The dais where the pharaoh sat gleams in the early light, though no throne occupies it now. A mainstream historical fact grounds you the pharaoh would conduct formal audiences here at dawn during festival weeks, dispensing justice and blessings. Today's session could determine the lovers' fates. You trudge across the marble floor, each footstep echoing like a distant proclamation. Your gaze falls on two towering statues of Amun and Mut standing guard by the ceremonial basin water, ready for the pharaoh's purification rites. You recall a quirky fringe tidbit. Some whispered that the princess planned to smuggle the amulet into the ritual waters, hoping its power would sanctify their union in the presence of gods. You wonder if the priests noticed the emerald's glow beneath ceremonial robes, or if historians still argue whether any such subterfuge ever occurred or remains the stuff of legend. Suddenly, a high priest enters, flanked by scribe attendants. His linen robes are immaculate collar, stiff with gold inlay, and his eyes flash when he spots you. He inclines his head politely, yet carries an air of authority that could part the Red Sea. You bow low, aware that his pronouncement could alter destinies. Messenger, he intones, voice resonant like chisels on stone. The council awaits at the hall of judgment. Bring forth the evidence. His gaze flicks to your satchel. You swallow, gripping its strap. Your mind races. Do you reveal the tokens and plead for mercy, or conceal them and risk the council's wrath? You recall a mainstream fact: Egyptian justice was intertwined with Maat, truth and order. Trials often required oaths before statues of Maat, with severe punishments for perjury. Falsehood would summon the goddess's retribution. Your palms sweat at the thought. A soft breeze drifts through open windows, carrying the scent of lotus and mandrake. You decide, heart resolute, to lay bare the lover's truth. You step forward and undo the satchel's clasp, offering the tokens one by one. The high priest's attendants gasp at the jade scarab, the clay seals the folded verses, and finally the emerald amulet. The air is so still, you think you hear a heartbeat reverberate through the hall. The high priest examines each piece, whispering incantations under his breath. His stern visage softens as he reads the love poem you place before him. He closes his eyes, head bowed, as though communing with unseen forces. You risk a glance at his lips, perhaps they form words you cannot hear. At length he stands and lifts his hand palm outward. By the balance of Ma'at and the will of Amun-Ra, he declares voice carrying to the distant colonnade, these tokens bear witness to a pure and binding love. Let neither decree nor curse sunder hearts aligned with divine harmony. Murmurs ripple through the attendants. Gasps of astonishment mingle with whispered blessings. You feel a warmth blooming in your chest, brighter than any torch flame. The high priest turns to you, gaze piercing, yet kind. You have served truth and love, well messenger. Return to the princess and her scribe. Tell them the gods favor their union. Your knees weaken. A fringe thought surfaces. Some accounts claim the high priest's blessing on forbidden love was unique in Egypt's history, later erased by subsequent dynasties. You tuck that notion away, pleased that legends sometimes hide miraculous exceptions. Historians still argue whether any high priest ever publicly endorsed such a union, or if later scribes crafted this miracle for storytelling. You bow deeply, gathering the tokens. As you rise, the hall's vastness recedes, and you sense the sun climbing higher in epical dawn, not just for palace politics, but for the lovers themselves. You step toward the doorway, clutching the amulet, close heart thrumming like temple drums. Before you leave, the high priest adds softly, "Go now. May your path be guided by light." You nod, voice caught in your throat, then turn and trudge down the corridor, the afterglow of divine favor warming every footstep. Outside, the courtyard blooms in full morning light, lotus petals opening to greet the sun. You smile, clutching the tokens that now symbolize not just forbidden passion, but sanctioned devotion. The world feels renewed, every carved relief, every gilded column anointed by the god's will. You trudge toward the secret passage, ready to deliver this extraordinary news to the princess and her scribe. A new chapter of their story begins here, written in sunlight, sealed by divine decree, and carried forth by your faithful steps. You close the secret passage behind you and trudge up the narrow stairway into the heart of the palace, where the morning air buzzes with news of the high priest's unprecedented blessing. Torchlight still lingers in alcoves, but sunlight now streams through tall windows, illuminating motes of dust that drift like tiny spirits. Everywhere you look, servants chatter that the gods themselves have endorsed this forbidden union, an event so rare it could shake the foundations of divine kingship. A mainstream historical fact steadies you. The Pharaoh's word was law delivered in person during dawn audiences. His silence here almost speaks louder than any decree. Under Amenhotep III, royal pronouncements were often inscribed on temple walls to immortalize his will. But today, you realize the Pharaoh's silence is the only proclamation needed. You navigate a marble-floored gallery lined with statues of Thoth, god of writing and judgment, his ibis head tilted as if observing your every move. You recall a quirky fringe tidbit rumor holds that when Thoth statues were struck at the correct angle, they emitted a soft chime, an acoustic phenomenon that priests used to signal secret messages. You pause to tap the nearest statue's foot, half expecting a melodic ping. Unsurprisingly, you hear nothing but the echo of your own ambition. Still, historians still argue whether these so-called resonant statues ever functioned or are simply fanciful tales. Ahead, you catch sight of two massive bronze doors, the entrance to the royal audience chamber. You trudge forward, every footstep echoing like an approaching verdict. Courtiers in linen kilts and broad collars pause in their tasks to stare as you pass, whispers of the messenger rippling through the crowd. You keep your gaze forward, remembering that even a flicker of hesitation could be mistaken for guilt. You enter the chamber at the sound of the Pharaoh's voice, low measured and tinged with restrained power. He stands upon a raised dais, wearing the white linen crown of Upper Egypt, its tall, gleaming form catching the morning light. His regal kilt is clasped with a gold belt inlaid with lapis lazuli, the stone imported from distant lands. A mainstream fact, Amenhotep III maintained diplomatic ties through marriage alliances, and precious lapis beads often came as gifts from his vassals. Here, that belt reminds you of the interconnectedness of power, politics, and destiny. The Pharaoh's gaze sweeps the chamber, resting momentarily on the tokens you carry. His lips part, and in that brief exhale, the air seems to tremble. You feel as though every carved hieroglyph on the walls leans in to catch his words. Messenger, he intones, voice like distant thunder, you bear evidence of my daughter's love, tokens of devotion blessed by the gods themselves. He pauses, and you sense his struggle, a ruler torn between paternal duty and divine favor. A hush falls. You brace yourself, recalling a quirky fringe suggestion some fringe scribes claim the pharaoh's heart was imbued with magic oils each dawn, granting him the ability to sense deception. According to legend, any falsehood uttered before him would cause the oil to smoke and hiss. You glance at his collar, half expecting a wisp of smoke. Nothing appears but the steady gleam of polished gold. Historians still argue whether any such truth oils ever existed, or if they were later inventions to scare dishonest courtiers. At length, the pharaoh steps down from the dais sandals, whispering on polished stone. His robes dyed with rare indigo swirl around him like a living tapestry. Courtiers bow, and the chamber's pillars seem to sigh in collective relief. He approaches you, hand outstretched, not for punishment, but for the emerald amulet itself. You draw a deep breath, extending the amulet as though offering your own pulse. He lifts it, examining the filigree inscriptions by the light filtering through a high window. You remember the glyph for freed by truth carved on the amulet's reverse. A soft murmur ripples through the audience. The pharaoh tests the token. He judges the heart behind the jewel. You swallow, recalling that Egyptian justice demanded not only truth, but confidence and unshakable bearing under royal scrutiny. The pharaoh turns the amulet in his fingertips brushing the emerald's surface. You watch his eyes flicker as he recalls the high priest's invocation of Mahat truth and cosmic balance. After a heartbeat that stretches like a desert horizon, he places the amulet in the palm of his open hand and speaks. This jewel bears witness to a love both pure and strong as tempered by the god's favor. Let no man or god who stands against it prevail. His words resonate through the vaulted hall like a blessing and a decree rolled into one. The courtiers release held breaths, and the tension dissipates into the polished columns. A gentle applause ripples modest yet heartfelt, as if the walls themselves acknowledge this unprecedented moment. He meets your gaze and nods once succinctly. You bow deeply, feeling the weight of history shift beneath your knees. The pharaoh turns and with regal grace retreats to a side antechamber, his cloak trailing like a comet's tail. You stand amidst the silent marvel of courtiers, too stunned to speak. Carefully, you retrieve the tokens from your satchel, scarab scrolls, seals, and the emerald amulet, and bundle them as if wrapping fragile dawn light in your arms. A mainstream fact echoes in your mind. After such royal audiences, tokens of favor were often placed in the royal treasury for safekeeping or redistributed as symbols of royal patronage. Here, however, these tokens represent something far more personal, a father's acceptance of his daughter's choice. You slip through the bronze doors on silent hinges, stepping back into the gallery. The morning sun has brightened, turning alabaster walls to creamy gold. Courtiers hurry past resumes of official business, already forgotten in the wake of this monumental proclamation. You find a quiet alcove and sit cradling the bundle of tokens. The plaque beneath the statue of Thoth reads by words, "Our realms upheld." You trace the statue's inscription with a fingertip and smile, knowing that today, words sung by priests and spoken by a pharaoh upheld not only a realm but two intertwined hearts. A gentle breeze drifts through an open window, carrying the scent of date blossoms and honeyed wine. It feels like the world itself has exhaled, releasing centuries of tension in a single breath. You tuck the tokens into a carved wooden box you carry for safekeeping, a makeshift reliquary for love's triumph. Rising, you glance back once more at the audience chamber, where carved reliefs now seem to glow with renewed purpose. You turn to flee, not from danger, but toward reunion. Your path leads back through galleries and secret passages to the princess and her scribe, whose destiny has been reshaped by divine and royal favor alike. As you trudge down the corridor, the echo of the pharaoh's decree follows you, a refrain more potent than any curse. Such love is blessed. Historians still argue whether any pharaoh ever personally blessed a forbidden union, or if this account is unique to the legend of Amenhotep's daughter. But standing in these same halls, you know you have witnessed the moment when law, love, and divine will converge in perfect harmony. You slip out of the audience chamber and into a quiet gallery lined with papyrus scroll racks and freestanding lecterns. The air here is cool and scented with the faint musk of aged parchment. You trudge past shelves piled high with tomes, administrative records, ritual manuals, and dusty commentaries penned by generations of scribes. A mainstream historical fact steadies you: the Royal Library at Thebes was one of Egypt's greatest repositories of knowledge, where priests, scholars, and officials debated theology, astronomy, and statecraft. Within its walls, every scroll was both a record of fact and a spark for argument. You pause before a low table strewn with fragments of broken ceramic palettes and ink-stained reeds. A single candle flickers beside a partially unrolled manuscript. You kneel to examine it. Pages of hieratic script debate the nature of the pharaoh's divine essence, whether kingship was inherited at birth or ritually bestowed. A fringe tidbit drifts through your mind. Rumor held that some secret societies of royal librarians met in hidden vaults to challenge the very foundations of priestly authority, sketching out radical theories about the god's mortality. You smooth a stray reed mark from the parchment, imagining the shockwaves such ideas would send through the temple precincts. Historians still argue whether any organized heretical debates took place in the royal archives, or if these murmurs belong to later sensational accounts. You stand and move along the gallery, your footsteps echoing between limestone columns. Ancient diagrams of celestial circles and agricultural calendars adorn the walls. You recall a mainstream fact: Egyptian astronomers charted the stars and planets with remarkable precision, using deacon tables to align temple rituals with celestial events. Those same scholars often argued whether divine will was written in the heavens or inscribed in sacred texts. Around the next corner, you find a group of priests gathered under a painted fresco of Thoth and Ma'at, the deities of wisdom and truth. They lean in close heads, bowed as one reads aloud from a leather-bound codex. You catch a phrase: whether the curse of the emerald amulet derives from thaumaturgy or political malice. Their tone is scholarly, but the tension is palpable, a debate poised between magic's legitimacy and the machinations of court intrigue. You step closer, yet remain unseen behind a carved pillar. One priest strokes his beard thoughtfully and counters, "If the curse were merely propaganda, why do we see records of inexplicable illnesses among those who opposed the princess?" Another retorts, "Medical papyri note such maladies as common epidemics. Scapegoating is a far more plausible explanation." You catch yourself wondering, is it skeptical reason or genuine fear that drives their questioning? A mainstream fact hums beneath their words. Egyptian healers recorded symptoms of dysentery, malaria, and trachoma in detailed casebooks, yet when nobles fell ill, whispers of divine retribution often flared. A scented breeze drifts in from an open window, carrying the metallic tang of the nearby Nile. You remind yourself of a fringe theory you once read, that some illnesses attributed to curses were artificially induced by toxic ointments slipped into baths, assassin's craft disguised as divine punishment. You press your palm to the pillar, feeling its cool grain, and muse. Historians still argue whether any documented poisonings were ever mistaken for supernatural vengeance. The debate shifts to the amulet's origin. One priest reads from a scrap of papyrus bearing astronomical symbols, claiming the emerald fell from the sky during a meteor shower. Another glances at a geological treatise and scoffs, "No emeralds come from the eastern desert mines." Meteor legends are poetic fancies. Their voices rise and fall like gentle waves, each argument countered by another. You step back, letting their discourse echo in your ears. The very walls hum with intellectual curiosity, a far cry from the court's earlier whispers of scandal. Here in the Royal Library, the question isn't whether love is lawful, but whether power and magic can ever be disentangled. A mainstream detail floats to mind: temple scriptoriums employed dozens of copyists who painstakingly reproduced texts, often introducing variant readings that fueled centuries of scholarly disagreement. No two manuscripts were ever identical, and each copying error became fodder for new interpretations. Tonight's debate is just the latest turn in an unbroken chain of inquiry. You pass a lectern where an open scroll shows a line glossed in red ink. The heart knows what the mind fears, a poetic claim that might explain why skeptics and believers clash over the amulet's true nature. A fringe anecdote suggests that the princess herself commissioned annotations in the margins, hoping scholars would argue her curse's authenticity and thus cement her legacy. You smile at the thought of a royal patron of controversy. You move on to a small alcove where a single elder librarian sits sorting fragments of broken ostraca. He looks up, eyes bright behind ink-stained fingers, and offers a knowing nod. You nod back, sensing a shared respect for inquiry's restless spark. Beyond him lies a sealed door marked Restricted Archives. You recall a mainstream fact: only the highest-ranking priests could enter such chambers, where texts on forbidden rituals and state secrets lay hidden. There, debates on divine curses and political strategy intertwined so tightly that few dared separate them. As you continue through the gallery, the priest's discussion fades behind you, replaced by the gentle crackle of torches. You reflect on the phrase you heard historians still argue whether the curse was real or political propaganda. In this hallowed hall, that debate is a live and evolving testament to Egypt's enduring quest for truth. You reach the gallery's far end, where a painted image of Ma'at weighs hearts against feathers on golden scales. You pause, tracing the goddess's serene profile, and feel the echo of every scholarly exchange stirring your thoughts. The balance of love, power, and knowledge weighs heavily on your mind. You press onward, heading toward the princess's private chambers to share the high priest's decree. But before you go, you offer a silent tribute to these seekers of wisdom. Those who hold that debate itself is a blessing as vital as any divine sanction. You trudge down the final stretch of marble floor, scholarly echoes still ringing, ready to deliver the verdict that will shape destinies both mortal and eternal. You approach the princess's private chambers, passing through a carved sandstone threshold where lotus and papyrus motifs intertwine, a visual promise of union and renewal. You trudge along a plush reed mat as footmen straighten draperies and refresh bowls of rose petals in alabaster basins. The air is warm with perfumed oils, and you can hear soft humming from within, a lullaby of anticipation. A mainstream historical fact grounds you: royal apartments were often fragranced with blends of jasmine, myrrh, and frankincense to soothe nerves and signal divine favor. Here, the scent feels almost celebratory, as though the very stones rejoice in the high priest's blessing. You pause at an ornately carved door and take a steadying breath, clutching the wooden reliquary that holds the scarab scrolls, seals, and amulet. A fringe detail surfaces. Some palace rumors insisted that the princess designed her chamber's scentscape to mimic the underworld's paradise, ensuring that visitors felt as though they entered a sacred grove. You smile at the thought of an underworld spa. Though you muse, historians still argue whether such intentional scent design was ever practiced or is purely imaginative. Inside, the princess reclines on a low-cushioned divan, her linen gown draped in sumptuous folds of saffron and gold. Beside her, the scribe kneels with reverent excitement, eyes bright with hope. The moment you enter, they rise together, every heartbeat echoing their shared relief. Her gaze falls on the reliquary. "You've returned," she whispers, voice quivering like a reed in the wind. You bow and present the reliquary. The scribe reaches out, fingertips brushing yours as he lifts the lid. You watch as he retrieves each token: the jade scarab, the clay seals, the folded papyri, and at last, the emerald amulet heart of their saga. A quirky fringe thought drifts through your mind. Some storytellers claimed that upon reunion, the emerald glowed brighter than the dawn, but you see only its serene green shimmer, no supernatural flair, just the gem's quiet elegance. Yet you recall historians still argue whether any emerald glow legends predate medieval romances or stem from modern embellishment. The princess presses the amulet to her hard eyes closed. She inhales deeply as if drawing divine breath, then opens her eyes and smiles through tears. "It's true," she murmurs, voice soft but unwavering. "The gods and my father have chosen our love." You allow yourself a small smile, thinking how rare such certainty is in a world woven of politics and prophecy. A mainstream historical fact drifts in when royal daughters married foreign princes. Their unions were celebrated with elaborate ceremonies in these very chambers. Yet this marriage, born of choice rather than alliance, is unprecedented. The scribe takes the princess's hand, placing the emerald chain around her neck. Its weight rests gently against her collarbone, and she nods regal even in emotion. You recall a quirky idea. Some nobles believed that wearing love tokens openly nullified curses, forcing magical forces to acknowledge their legitimacy. Whether true or not, the symbolic reveal feels potent. A soft chime echoes from a hidden servant's gong announcement of the princess's readiness. She turns to you, expression radiant. "Let us go before the people," she says, voice steady. You bow, gesturing to the scribe to lead. Together, the three of you slip past attendants, who part like reeds in a river, their faces alight with wonder at the princess's radiant strength. Courtiers pause, mid-task lips parting in astonishment. News of her divine blessing already hums through the palace. You trudge alongside them through sunlit galleries, every statue and relief seeming to watch this historic procession. A mainstream fact crosses your mind. Royal marriages were typically officiated by the high priest in the temple's sacred precincts, but today's ceremony will blend public celebration with private devotion, an intimate rite witnessed by gods and subjects alike. As you exit into the grand courtyard, a hush falls. Servants, priests, and guards assemble in respectful silence. The obelisk's shadow stretches across polished stone, and the crowd parts to reveal the princess and her scribe, hand in hand. You step back, offering them the honor they deserve. A chorus of trumpets, a fanfare reserved for royal announcements, shatters the silence. The princess raises her free hand, her wrist adorned with the emerald's chain. "I, daughter of the Pharaoh, atoned by divine favor and paternal blessing, pledge my heart to this man." Her voice rings clear across the courtyard. "May our union bring harmony to this realm." The scribe bows and echoes, "And I, humble servant of the crown, pledge my life to her service and love." A murmur crescendos into cheers, an unexpected roar that pulses like thunder over river and desert. The high priest steps forward, raising his arms in benediction. You catch a glimpse of the Pharaoh in a distant gallery window, statue still, as he surveys his daughter's triumph. You allow the moment to wash over you, love, sanctioned by God's Father and people. The tokens you carried have become more than keepsakes. They are symbols of a new era, where hearts may speak as loudly as decrees. As the cheers echo, you slip away quietly, heart light and purpose fulfilled. Ahead, the palace gates yawning open promise, a return to the world beyond, where their story will echo in every whispered legend. You linger in the courtyard a moment longer, watching the lovers step forward beneath a spray of date palm fronds thrown by jubilant attendants. Their figures backlit by rising suns seem to glow with hope. Then softly, you turn and trudge back the way you came, tokens safely stored, mind alight with the tale you will carry beyond these walls. You slip away from the jubilant courtyard and make your way toward the necropolis wing of the palace, a seldom trodden domain where echoing hallways lead to dust-choked chambers and silent tombs. You trudge through a low, arched portal carved with vultures in flight, their wings spread as if to guard the threshold. The air grows cooler, scented faintly with aged resin and crumbling papyrus. A mainstream historical fact steadies you. Royal necropoleas were constructed adjacent to palaces so that kings and queens could be interred near the living court, honoring the continuity between life and death. Yet tonight, you're drawn by whispers of an eerie tomb, where the lovers once dared to steal a moment of refuge or ruin their fate forever. Torches line the corridor, their flames guttering against the thick stone walls. You trudge forward, boots stirring ancient sand that crunches beneath you. Half-buried pottery shards and broken Ushabti figures litter the floor, tokens of past burials and forgotten rituals. A quirky fringe tidbit drifts through your mind. Local guides claim that at midnight, the spirits of the interred stir among the columns, seeking solace or vengeance. You shiver, though you remind yourself historians still argue whether any genuine accounts of tomb hauntings predate medieval travelogues or are pure legend. The corridor opens into a vast antechamber where 4 massive granite pillars rise like silent sentinels. Each is inscribed with prayers to Osiris, god of the afterlife. You recall a mainstream fact Osirian texts hung on temple walls to guide souls through the duat, pleading for safe passage past demons and weighing of the heart. Here, those same inscriptions seem to watch your every move. In the center of the chamber lies the entrance to the mysterious tomb, its stone slab pushed aside to reveal a yawning black mouth. You trudge closer, heart pounding, as a faint draft of cool air drifts upward. The lovers' rumor says once entered this tomb to seal their vows in the presence of death itself, an act of devotion so desperate it nearly damned them. Outside the slab, a ring of dried lotus petals forms a fragile circle. You kneel, brushing away dust to reveal a faint inscription, "Love defies even death's domain." Beneath the letters, you press your palm to the stone and feel a subtle vibration as if the tomb itself hums with memory. A stray breeze stirs dust motes in a shaft of torchlight. You shiver, remembering the fringed tale that the tomb's inner sanctum houses a hidden spring whose waters can grant dreams of past lives or nightmares of unending separation. You swallow hard, debating whether to descend. After all, you've carried every token safely this far. Why risk the tomb's uncanny power? Yet curiosity and duty drive you on. You step inside, torch held aloft, and descend a flight of uneven stone steps, slick with moisture. Each echoing footfall seems to draw distant murmurs, half-heard sighs, and faint drip-drip-drip sounds. A mainstream historical fact whispers in your mind, royal tombs were sealed after burial with ritual curses etched on walls warning tomb robbers of divine wrath. Tonight, you feel those ancient curses brush against your neck. At the bottom, you enter a narrow corridor lined with painted scenes of the afterlife chariots, faring gods, supplicant souls kneeling before Osiris's throne, and in one panel, a woman kneeling beside a scribe, hands joined. You pause, torchlight trembling as you recognize the lover's likeness, a rare depiction in a royal tomb. Their names appear in faded hieroglyphs, Ankhesenpaten and Merenith. Your breath catches. A fringe scholar once argued this scene was a later addition by a court artist seeking to romanticize the princess's memory, but you see the natural wear of age on the pigments, no later strokes to suggest forgery. Historians still argue whether these reliefs date to the princess's lifetime or were posthumous tributes, you murmur. Beyond the relief, the corridor opens into the tomb's inner chapel, a vaulted space barely illuminated by your torch. Dried lotus oil from ancient lamps pools in shadowed corners. At its center stands a sarcophagus carved from black basalt, its lid adorned with a relief of a kneeling man and woman clasping hands in eternal embrace. You sigh, recognizing the motifs of both Hathor and Osiris entwined around their figures, symbols of love, triumphant beyond death. You step closer, reaching out to trace the carved outlines of their clasped hands. The basalt is cool beneath your fingertips, and you sense a faint pulse, impossible, yet undeniable. A sudden cold gust swirls around your ankles, rattling dust and stirring broken ushabti into timid skitters. You step back heart-hammering as if you've awakened a dream too vivid to ignore. A soft voice echoes somewhere above, whispered words you can't quite make out. You strain to listen. Is it the princess calling your name, or a trick of acoustics among granite walls? You swallow, reminding yourself of a mainstream fact tomb. Chapels often echoed utterances in strange ways, as sound waves refracted across curved ceilings. Perhaps this is just sound physics, but in this moment, it feels like a spirit's invocation. You raise your torch higher, scanning the chapel's walls. One relief shows the lovers diving into the primordial waters of Nun, a gesture of rebirth and unity. Beneath it, an inscription reads, "Our bond endures beyond sun and shadow." You lean closer, muttering the words as if pledging your own commitment to preserve their story. But then, the floor beneath you shifts a barely perceptible tremor that sends a cascade of dust from the ceiling. Your heart leaps as the sarcophagus lid shifts ever so slightly, as though inviting you to peer within. You brace yourself, knowing that opening a royal tomb was taboo and dangerous. Yet you cannot look away. Your fingers brush the lid's edge. A surge of adrenaline floods your veins. You force yourself to step back. The hush returns. The Ushabti cease their skittering, and the chapel falls silent once more. You realize some mysteries are meant to endure in shadow. You turn and retrace your steps, guided by torchlight and the memory of that living relief. At the top of the stairs, you pause outside the tomb's mouth, taking one last look at the wartime scars in its stone lintel. You vow silently not to disturb its secrets further. Emerging into the antechamber, you feel the warmth of the palace corridors beckoning. You shiver once more, part dread, part awe, and tuck your torch into a bracket. As you make your way back through the silent halls, you carry with you an indescribable sense of closeness to history's hidden heartbeat. Outside the tomb, the corridor's torchlight steadies your racing pulse. You trudge toward the princess's solar chamber, knowing that the memory of this eerie encounter will shadow every future whisper of their legend. Historians still argue whether the eerie tomb beneath the palace actually exists, or if it belongs solely to the realm of legend, and perhaps that's as it should be, for some stories gain their power in the whispers of what cannot be fully proved. You slip from the gloomy necropolis wing back into the palace's sunlit eastern galleries, heart still drumming from the tomb's hush. You trudge past polished columns etched with scenes of harvest feasts, women bearing baskets of grapes, and men pouring libations of wine. The scent of ripening dates hangs in the air, reminding you that life and death entwine in this realm of divine rulership. A mainstream historical fact grounds you at Amenhotep III's court. Elaborate harvest festivals celebrated agricultural bounty and reinforced the pharaoh's role as life-giver. Here, garlands of pomegranates and figs adorn walls, their painted counterparts nearly as vivid as fresh fruit. You pause before a small alcove containing a low stone bench, rumored to be the lover's seat, where the princess and her scribe once paused to share their final bargain. You kneel to inspect the bench's surface, spotting faint red ochre stains, perhaps from spilled wine or a hurried kiss. A quirky fringed tidbit whispers that some believed the princess dipped her finger into a goblet of pomegranate juice and pressed it to her scribe's lips as a vow of sweetness and commitment. Historians still argue whether any lasting stains were ever recorded, or if the pomegranate kiss is pure romantic fancy you muse. You settle onto the bench, tracing carved lotus and papyrus motifs worn smooth by centuries of foot traffic. Your back presses against cool limestone as you recall the lovers' pact in this very spot. They vowed to forsake titles and wealth for a life bound by affection alone. You remember the amulet's inscription, bound by love, freed by truth, and feel its echo in your chest. As you rise, your attention shifts to a nearby mural depicting a chariot race, a mainstream fact reflecting Egypt's fondness for ceremonial contests. Yet here, among charging steeds, you spot two riders clasping hands instead of reins, a hidden detail celebrating unity over victory. You press your palm to the wall, imagining the artist's sly tribute to the princess's defiance of convention. Continuing through the gallery, you pass a pool-fed fountain where rose petals float on rippling water. You dip a fingertip into the cool flow, tasting the faint sweetness of floral oil. A fringe notion flits by. Some courtiers whispered that the princess once slipped a tiny scroll into the fountain's basin, trusting its currents to deliver her messages directly to her scribe downstream. You chuckle softly. Historians still argue whether aquatic message delivery ever reached beyond folklore. Ahead, you reach a carved door bearing the cartouche of the princess. You press the secret latch, a small ankh hidden in the relief, and the door swings open to reveal her solar chamber, where morning light spills across polished benches and painted friezes of the sun god Ra's barge crossing the sky. The chamber's warmth envelops you like a benediction. Inside, the princess and scribe await amid silk cushions and low tables set with fresh pomegranates and honey cakes. Their eyes light at your arrival. She rises gracefully, smoothing her saffron robes, then steps aside to reveal a golden casket resting on a pedestal of black granite. You recognize it from earlier in your journey, its hinged lid adorned with interlocking hearts in relief. He lifts the lid to reveal a folded linen cloth embroidered with the image of the emerald amulet, now entwined with lotus vines. The princess explains, "We will marry at sunset, exchanging vows before Hathor's temple. Tomorrow we depart for the Nile's delta, where a modest house awaits us." You feel a thrill after so much secrecy. They now plan an open life together. A mainstream fact grounds the moment royal daughters typically married foreign princes or influential nobles. But here, the princess chooses love over politics. Her scribe, once a low-ranking noble, will rise by her side, their union a new model for dynastic alliances. Historians still argue whether any Egyptian princess ever married beneath her station by choice. You reflect knowing this marriage stands alone. The princess crosses to you and places a small jar of red ochre in your hands. "Mark our union," she says softly. Then return the jar to the temple's foundation stones as thanks. You nod, honored by her trust. You dip a finger in ochre and trace a tiny heart on your palm, a private pledge you will carry forever. As you step back, the scribe pours fresh date wine into 3 cups. You lift yours in silent toast, feeling a warmth that transcends the sunlit chamber. The princess murmurs, "To love's final bargain," and you sip sweetness and tang, mingling on your tongue. A breeze drifts through a high window, carrying the distant beat of festival drums. You realize the palace itself seems to join in celebration. You breathe deeply, savoring the moment when private vow becomes shared destiny. You bow and step toward the door, ready to fulfill the princess's request. Outside, the limestone corridors await your tread, each step a reminder that love's legacy unfolds not just in grand gestures, but in quiet tokens and simple acts of faith. As you depart, the princess calls softly, "Come back at dusk." You smile, thread of loyalty woven through your spirit, and reply, "I will," with blessings in hand. You trudge away, ochre jar secured mind alight with anticipation for the final chapters of this extraordinary tale. You trudge back through winding corridors toward the outer courtyard, ochre jar secure at your side, and sense a change in the air, a rising hush before upheaval. Outside, you step onto warm flagstones as the sky dims not from dusk, but from swirling dust on the horizon. You trudge forward, boots echoing as a low rumble grows beneath the wind's hiss. A mainstream historical fact steadies you. Desert storms known as Khamsin swept across Egypt in the late spring, carrying scorching air and choking sand for days. They could halt river traffic, obscure temple rituals, and leave courtyards buried in golden grit. Tonight you realize the storm arrives on cue for the lover's final bargain. Your cloak whips around your shoulders as the first grains of sand snap against your face. You press a linen wrap over your mouth, tasting iron and earth. A quirky fringe tidbit drifts through your mind. Some villagers claimed that during a Khamsin, you could glimpse phantom silhouettes, ghosts of travelers lost in the dunes dancing on the wind to guide or mislead the living. You squint into the haze and think historians still argue whether such mirages ever assisted wanderers or simply preyed on frightened minds. The courtyard gate stands open, torchlight flickering like beacons in the storm's gloom. You trudge past statues of Anubis and Sekhmet, their faces half buried by drifting sands. Each step kicks up a mini whirlwind, and you cling to the ochre jar, its lid secured. The winds buffet you, threatening to rip the jar from your grasp, but you tighten your grip. This token must reach its destination. Ahead, the princess and her scribe wait beneath a lattice canopy draped with date palm fronds. He holds her close his robes and her saffron gown plastered with grit, but neither seems to mind. She lifts a hand in greeting her emerald amulet, glinting like a solitary star in the dusty gloom. You trudge toward them, shielded by their resolute calm. A mainstream detail whispers in your ear, Egyptians saw sandstorms as the desert god. Set's wrath, tests of endurance that purified both land and spirit. They built walls and windbreaks to protect sacred spaces, but tonight, no barrier can stop this cosmic trial. You imagine Set himself roaring across the sands, eager to challenge any mortal daring enough to wed beneath his fury. The princess smiles through grit-flecked lashes. "You're here," she breathes, voice nearly lost in the gale. You hand her the jar of red ochre. She nods to her scribe, and together they step into the storm's heart. You follow, tramping across sand-laden ground. They stand before an ancient limestone altar, half buried now, its carved lotus capital scattering wind-driven grit. The scribe uncorks the jar and dips his finger into the crimson powder, then traces matching hearts on the princess's and his own forearms, symbols of eternal unity. The storm whips around you, painting each gesture with raw drama. A fringe notion surfaces. Some romance chroniclers claim that couples who marked themselves in a calm sin cemented their bond so fiercely that even death could not part them. Whether that's practical law or poetic fancy, you watch the princess press the ochre into her skin, sealing her vow with both love and defiance. Historians still argue whether such sandstorm rituals were ever recorded in temple texts or if they belong solely to love stories. The wind intensifies and torches sputter, but the lovers remain steadfast. The scribe raises a small censer filled with incense frankincense mixed with lotus oil, its smoke swirling into the dusty vortex. A mainstream fact: Egyptians believed that rising smoke carried prayers to the gods. Here, it forms a swirling conduit of devotion amid chaos. You smell sweet resin cutting through the metallic tang of sand and think how defiant hope can be. As the incense smoke drifts upward, you join their circle, raising a third cup of date wine. Together, you let each sip wash away grit and fear, tasting warmth that defies the storm's chill. You murmur a soft blessing. May this storm cleanse and renew you, and they echo your words in hushed cadence. Lightning forks in the swirling sky, a rare desert flash, and the courtyard glows momentarily under its stark illumination. You recall a mainstream historical fact: thunderstorms were uncommon in Lower Egypt, and when lightning struck near temples, priests interpreted it as a message from Ra. Here, that flash feels like divine approval shining through Set's trial. A sudden crack sends hearts racing. A sandstone obelisk toppled by gale-force gusts crashes to the ground, dust erupting like fiery blossoms. You stagger back, sand stinging your eyes. The princess cries out, but the scribe grips her hand, steadying her with unwavering resolve. They stand amid the fallen monument, as if nothing in the storm can unmake them. A gust slams against your back, nearly knocking you to your knees. You struggle forward, boots slipping on loose sand. The princess calls, "Stay close," and you dive behind a low wall for shelter. Shielding your face, you peek through the whirling haze to see them pressed together, hearts bound in crimson and jade. Now she shouts, voice carrying above the roar, "Let us invoke Hathor's blessing." The scribe lifts the emerald amulet high, its gilded filigree catching a stray torch's glow. In that instant, the amulet pulses, a brief, radiant throb that cuts through the storm like a beacon. You gasp, certain you heard its whisper bonded. A fringe tale rattles in your mind. Some said the emerald wept tears of resin when touched by true devotion in the desert's fury. You scan the amulet's loop, but see no droplets, only the stone's smooth, unwavering glow. Yet the notion lingers as you think. Historians still argue whether any such weeping amulet accounts predate medieval romances or if they're later inventions. A moment of calm follows. The wind drops to a soft howl, and the sandstorm seems to pause as though holding its breath. The princess closes her eyes, raising her face to the swirling skies, and you feel the hush like a drape settling over unrest. She places the amulet against her heart lips, moving in silent prayer. Then the wind resumes, gentler now, guiding stray petals and incense smoke into a slow spiral around the three of you. You stand watching as the storm becomes a waltz of sand and spirit dancers bound by love's insistence. You sense Set's challenge has been met not with defiance alone, but with unity and faith. In that grand swirl, you realize the true curse was never the emerald's magic, but the world's expectation that love must bow to politics. Here, beneath Set's howling domain, love stands unbroken, sanctified by storm and vow. As the wind finally eases into a golden twilight breeze, you step forward, offering arms to steady the princess and her scribe. The storm yields to evening's calm, drawing back, like a tide leaving the courtyard, etched in rippling sand patterns. You gather the empty ochre jar and sip the last drop of date wine, tasting ash and sweetness mingled with triumph. The three of you stand amid scattered petals and fallen dust hearts, aligned beneath a sky, now clearing to reveal the first evening stars. You trudge toward the palace gate, ready to guide them home to a sanctuary purified by sand and oath. In the storm's wake, you carry with you the echo of grit and grace, entwined a testament to love's power when it dares to dance in set's fury. You guide the princess and her scribe back through the palace's lantern-lit corridors, their silken robes still flecked with desert grit. The courtyard's dunes settle behind you as you slip beneath archways carved with solar discs, each relief radiating golden light, even in torch glow that seems to echo hope's return. You trudge forward, footsteps soft on reed mats laid by dutiful servants. A mainstream historical fact steadies you palace corridors, often aligned with cardinal directions to symbolize cosmic order, east for birth, west for death. Tonight, you retrace footsteps from chaos back toward renewal, moving west to the royal apartments where sanctuary awaits. A quirky fringe tidbit drifts into your mind. Some insiders claimed that lovers who braved Set's storm found secret alcoves newly revealed in the palace's shifting sands, doorways leading to lost gardens or forgotten libraries. You scan each wall for hidden latches, half expecting a magic portal, but find only familiar reliefs of lotus blooms and crawling scarabs. Still, historians still argue whether any storm-born secrets ever emerged, or if those tales rose from hopeful imaginations. You pause at a wide arch overlooking the inner garden, a green oasis of date palms, jasmine, and water channels fed by concealed conduits. Moonlight glints on the steady drip of a small fountain, its rhythm like a lullaby after the storm's roar. You inhale the cool, fragrant air and feel the weight of the night's trials begin to lift. Ahead, the princess's solar chamber awaits its lattice windows shining with dawn's first glow. The scribe squeezes your arm in gratitude, his eyes bright with unspoken thanks. You murmur, "Almost home," and lead them down a short flight of steps carpeted in woven reeds. A mainstream fact surfaces royal apartments were designed as secluded sanctuaries, insulated from palace bustle by thick walls and sound-dampening reed screens. Here, privacy protected both power and personal joys. You step inside, drawing the heavy curtain behind you. The chamber's hearth crackles softly, a solitary fire stoked by an attendant earlier in anticipation of their return. You trudge forward, noting how the room's carved bench once held tokens of royal worship, but now awaits the couple's personal rites. A fringe musing crosses your mind. Rumor held that the palace hearths were symbolically linked to Vesta-like shrines, ensuring that the royal family's hearth fire never died, yet another layer of domestic divinity. Historians still argue whether domestic fire cults ever existed in Egypt, or if that concept migrated from classical traditions. The princess crosses to a low table where a fresh bowl of cooled lotus tea steams gently. She pours 3 cups, handing you one. You lean against the carved bench, savoring the floral bitterness as warmth spreads through your chest. The scribe and princess share a soft smile, no words needed to acknowledge the night's miracles. You place the ochre jar on a small pedestal and watch as the princess lifts its lid. The crimson powder inside seems vibrant, even in muted lamplight. She dips her fingertip once more and traces a tiny loop on your hand, a silent emblem of your loyalty and friendship. Your pulse quickens at the intimacy of the gesture, and you murmur a heartfelt thank you eyes moist. A mainstream historical detail offers comfort among Egyptians. Red ochre symbolized life's blood, and the earth's fertility markings in red ink on temple walls announced royal decrees. Here, the ochre becomes a personal decree of unity and gratitude, a small but potent symbol. The scribe fetches a folded linen cloth embroidered with the interlocking hearts motif. He unwraps it carefully, revealing a hidden pocket sewn into the hem. Within lies a single lotus seed, promise of growth and renewal. He places it in your palm. "Plant this where silence speaks," he whispers. You catch his meaning in the palace garden's hidden corner, away from prying eyes. This seed will grow into a living testament to their love. A serene hush settles over the chamber. The 3 of you sit in companionable silence, sipping tea and listening to the hearth's gentle crackle. You recall the night's journey, moonlit meetings, courtly plots, secret passages, divine blessings, and the storm that tested their bonds. Each step wove together faith and courage tokens and trials, forging a narrative that transcends time. Before you depart, the princess rises and drapes her arm around your shoulders. Rest now, she says softly, voice tender as lotus petals. Tomorrow we celebrate openly. For now, be our honored guest and friend. You bow your head, warmed by her words and the restful promise. You rise quietly, placing the lotus seed in the princess's hands. I'll see to its planting, you vow. She nods, pressing the seed into the fabric of your robe as if to guard your promise. Turning to leave, you glance back at the hearth-lit chamber, its cushions, its draped silks, its hushed reverence. In this sacred space, you leave behind not just a seed, but the final fragment of a legend woven from whispered vows and divine decree. As you step through the curtain and back into the palace's waking halls, you carry with you the echoes of forbidden love, now transformed into open celebration. The palace's dawn chorus birds in hidden aviaries, distant chimes of temple bells greets you like applause. You trudge onward toward your own quarters, heart-light with fulfillment and wonder. Outside, the Nile's waters gleam under the emerging sun, mirroring the emerald amulet's glow. History's currents carry this tale forward, seeded in heart and earth, waiting to bloom beyond palace walls. Historians still argue whether any physical remnant of this secret seed ever sprouted in the palace garden, or if it remains only in memory. But you know that love like the lotus rises from dark waters to greet the light, resilient, radiant, and eternal. You slip from the princess's solar chamber into a quiet antechamber where morning light filters through narrow windows, painting golden patterns on polished limestone floors. You trudge past alcoves containing tiny censers, still smoldering with lotus incense, a faint reminder of last night's vows and prayers. A hush settles over the palace, as though the very stones hold their breath for what comes next. A mainstream historical fact steadies you. Royal decrees in the 18th dynasty were often inscribed on temple walls and recorded on papyrus scrolls, ensuring the pharaoh's word endured for eternity. Tonight, you're here to witness a hidden clause, a secret redemption woven into new decrees that will rewrite endless court gossip. You pass shelves of administrative papyri stacked like silent sentinels. Each bundle bears the royal seal in red ochre, same pigment you carried through wind and stone, linking your journey to the official record. You recall how scribes in Amenhotep III's reign standardized legal language to curb abuse of power, ensuring fairness in everything from land grants to marriage contracts. Ahead, a curtained doorway opens into the private council chamber. You trudge through and find the high priest and a small circle of royal scribes gathered around a low table. The princess stands at their side, her saffron robes still dusted with desert grit, holding the emerald amulet in one hand. The scribe stands beside her face, alight with suppressed joy. One senior scribe clears his throat and lays out 3 papyrus rolls. "Your Majesty," he intones to the princess, "these bear the pharaoh's new edict." The high priest uncovers the first scroll and unfurls it with deliberate care. Ancient hieroglyphs trace lines of loyalty, tribute, and law. You notice a fresh mark, a small heart-shaped seal pressed next to the royal cartouche. A quirky fringe tidbit drifts through your mind. Court rumors suggested that the pharaoh's private seal matrix included a tiny heart glyph, added secretly by his daughter's hand, a playful nod to love that might never appear in public documents. You lean closer, studying the seal's faint indentation. It seems genuine, but historians still argue whether any such heart seals were ever used by Egyptian royalty or remain the stuff of romantic legend. The high priest reads the edict aloud. In acknowledgement of divine will and paternal mercy, let it be recorded that the princess's union with her chosen companion shall stand free of customary tribute burdens. All lands and estates granted to the princess henceforth shall be shared equally, and no court levy or priestly tithe shall impede their household. A ripple of awe sweeps through the room. You press your fingers flat on the table's smooth wood, tasting the echo of justice. A mainstream historical fact surfaces: royal women of the 18th dynasty could hold property independently, but joint ownership with non-royals was unprecedented. This clause would reframe dynastic norms forever. The second scroll unfolds. Its text stipulates that any past accusations or insinuations against the scribe be officially retracted and his record expunged of all charges treason, sedition, and most pointedly, unsanctioned affection toward the royal bloodline. The phrase is so explicit it draws a gasp even from the high priest. A fringe notion flickers in your mind. Whispers claimed that palace officials once concocted charges of magical seduction to divorce inconvenient spouses, legal but steeped in intrigue. These same tactics nearly doomed the princess's love. You recall, yet tonight, they reversed those same maneuvers. Historians still argue whether any official retractions of such marital accusations survive in Egyptian archives or have vanished from record. The final scroll bears a short but potent amendment. The emerald amulet itself is recognized as a royal emblem of unbroken bond to be preserved in the royal treasury alongside the pharaoh's personal regalia. It commands that future generations regard it as a symbol of love's sanctity and mercy's strength. The princess lifts the amulet gently and holds it aloft. Torchlight glints off its gold filigree, casting dancing reflections on painted walls. The high priest steps forward, touching the amulet's loop with reverent fingers. You feel the chamber's air shift a collective sigh of relief and reverence. You recall a mainstream fact temple treasuries hid jewelry of immense value and spiritual weight, often accessible only to the pharaoh and highest priests. By naming the amulet among them, the edict elevates this love token to the realm of divine relics. Silence follows as the high priest pronounces, "Thus is mercy sealed by decree, and love honored in law." The scribes carefully re-roll the scrolls, pressing the heart seal into fresh clay before tucking each papyrus into a wooden chest. You watch heartful as they bind the chest with a gold-embroidered sash, an act both ceremonial and permanent. A subtle breeze drifts through an open lattice window, stirring the princess's gown. She turns to you, expression tender. "You have borne witness to this redemption," she says, voice gentle. "It will shape our world." You bow humbly, acknowledging your role in preserving their truth. Before you depart, the high priest adds thoughtfully, "Let these decrees stand as testament that mercy is the greatest power a pharaoh may wield." His gaze lingers on the amulet, then meets your gratitude and solemn respect in his eyes. You step back into the corridor chest, swelling with awe. The wooden chest's gold trim etches a warm glow against your mind's eye, a symbol not just of royal favor, but of principled justice. As you trudge away, you sense the pulse of history quickening, new chapters unfolding where once only whispered rumors stood. Historians still argue whether any hidden decrees like these ever existed or were simply later fabrications intended to romanticize Amenhotep III's reign. But standing here, you know the power of mercy to rewrite both law and legend. You vanish into the palace's shifting light, carrying the memory of secret redemption that altered destinies and honored love's unyielding strength. You leave the private council chamber and descend a broad marble staircase into the palace's grand archives, the air rich with the scent of aged papyrus and cedarwood scroll chests. You trudge past shelves carved from ebony and sycamore, each laden with records of royal births, battles, and temple inventories. Here, the amulet's next chapter awaits. A mainstream historical fact steadies you. Egyptian archives meticulously cataloged precious items deposited in temple treasuries and royal treasuries, noting provenance, material, and ritual use. Tonight, you enter the room where the royal emblem of unbroken bond has been stored, its name newly inscribed on ledger pages once blank. You trudge toward a tall oaken cabinet bound with bronze clasps. A high priest stands beside it, eyes glinting with reverence. He murmurs a hymn in Thoth's honor, invoking wisdom to guide your hands. You watch as he slides a bronze key into the nearest clasp, the metal's soft click echoing in the hushed hall. Inside, nestled on crimson velvet rests, the emerald amulet, its gold filigree sparkling in torchlight. You lift it carefully, noting how the emerald surface bears no scratch or chip, as though time itself honors its sanctity. A fringe tidbit flutters through your thoughts centuries later. Whispered legends claim the amulet surfaced briefly in the hands of Greco-Roman collectors, only to vanish mysteriously, perhaps spirited away by shadowy cults or protective guardians. Historians still argue whether any credible records of such Roman sightings exist, or if they're mere travelers' tales. You cradle the amulet, feeling its steady pulse. A mainstream fact hums beneath your fingertips: emeralds were believed to grant protection across realms, physical, spiritual, and political. Emperors and caliphs coveted Egyptian emeralds, mounting them in crowns and signet rings as symbols of enduring power. Yet this amulet's heritage remains uniquely tied to love's redemption. You close the cabinet and trudge down a narrow gallery lined with painted registers depicting temple offerings. Gods gaze benevolently from lotus throne reliefs, their silent presence a reminder that items stored here hold divine favor. You wonder how many priests and scribes paused over this very path, noting the amulet's entry into sacred custody. A gust of air stirs a tumble of papyri on a nearby lectern, and you pause to steady them. One scroll falls open to a later entry. Year 5, reign of Ptolemy. Philopater emerald emblem transferred to sanctuary of Hathor at Dendera. You trace the script with your fingertip, imagining Hellenistic priests marveling at its lineage. Historians still argue whether Ptolemaic catalogs accurately reflected older treasures, or if some items were rebranded to flatter Greek rulers. You continue to a back room where a single alabaster jar bears the amulet's original wooden box, now decayed to brittle fibers. A careful note reads, "Do not open. Vessel consecrated. Only Pharaoh or high priest may gaze upon contents." You murmur thanks to discreet custodians who preserved both amulet and secrecy. A fringe legend surfaces. Some said that during the Byzantine era, the amulet was smuggled out of Egypt by a monk fleeing Arab conquest, ending up in a secret monastery in Cappadocia, its emerald glow lighting dark cellars when worshippers gathered. You imagine hooded figures passing the amulet in candlelit vaults, whispering of divine love that transcends empire. Yet historians still argue whether any Byzantine sources mention an Emerald of Hathor, or if the tale arose centuries later. You slip the high priest's cabinet key from your belt and carry it with you, a token of trust. Carrying it through narrow passages, you ascend to the palace's rooftop terrace, where gently swaying date palms offer a rare view of the Nile's silver ribbon winding through golden plains. Here, history's whispers feel close enough to touch. You stand beneath a carved stone sill, a dedication to Amenhotep's memory, and lift the amulet to the moonlit sky. Its green brilliance seems to echo the river's flow. You recall a mainstream fact: the Nile's annual inundation governed Egypt's calendar. Emeralds symbolized renewal, mirroring that life-giving flood. In this rooftop's high air, the amulet's essence aligns with the river's eternal rhythm. A quiet breeze carries echoes of centuries, chants, prayers, thunderous crowds. You sense the amulet's journey unfolding temple sanctuaries, royal treasuries, foreign courts, hidden monastic vaults, and perhaps secret collections in distant empires. At each turn, the emerald carried the whisper of its origin, a love so pure, even gods and kings could not deny it. You trudge along the terrace's edge, setting the amulet gently against a sandstone balustrade carved with lotus blossoms. Under the heavens, you murmur its legend: love consecrated by divine mercy, sealed by a pharaoh's compassion, blessed by priests enshrined across dynasties. A fringe scholar's note drifts through your mind. Some modern researchers insisted the amulet vanished during the sack of Alexandria, swallowed by history, only to reappear in spirit in songs and stories across Mediterranean ports. Historians still argue whether those songs trace to Egyptian origin or Mediterranean reinvention. You lift the amulet once more, pressing it to your heart before securing it in a new silk pouch embroidered with interlocking hearts and lotus vines, an homage to its dual heritage of love and rebirth. You slip the pouch into your satchel alongside the bronze key. Turning from the terrace's railing, you gaze at the palace's intricate silhouette. Towering pylons, slender obelisks, and temples rising like silent prayers. Below, the Nile's waters shimmer, carrying unseen currents that echo the amulet's own river of memory. You breathe deeply, savoring the scene, centuries of devotion distilled into a single artifact now poised for its next chapter. You descend the stairs, each step carrying you closer to where future custodians await. You realize the amulet's legacy rests not in vaults or scrolls, but in hearts those of emperors and lovers alike who carried its story forward. As you trudge back into the archives, the high priest awaits with a gentle bow. You present him the amulet with the bronze key and share a final silent vow you will ensure its journey continues. Its legend honored its promise of love, undimmed by time. Historians still argue whether the physical amulet survived beyond Roman times or lives now only in mythic refrain. But standing here, you know the true relic is love itself, its memory as enduring as emerald stone. You trudge away from the archives, the echo of your footsteps bridging past and future, carrying forward the amulet's unbroken bond into history's next unfolding page. You leave the palace's echoing archives behind and traverse a final gallery lined with gilded reliefs depicting Egypt's storied past from Narmer's unification to Amenhotep's golden age. You trudge beneath painted ceilings where migrating birds and celestial constellations swirl in endless patterns, symbols of continuity and change. Here you prepare to trace the Emerald Amulet's journey beyond Egypt's sun-drenched sands. A mainstream historical fact steadies you. After the 18th dynasty, Egypt saw periods of foreign rule, Libyan, Nubian, Assyrian, Persian, each dynasty absorbing and reshaping royal customs. Through every upheaval, temple treasuries and royal vaults were looted, rebuilt, or repurposed. Yet somehow the amulet endured its provenance, preserved by those who recognized its unique significance. Your path leads you to a carved stone niche at the gallery's end, where a single papyrus scroll lies sealed with clay and daubed with red ochre. An attendant hands it to you. "The Chronicle of the Emerald Bond," he whispers. You break the seal and unroll the scroll to reveal annotations spanning centuries. First entry dated to the Ramesside period c. 1200 BCE notes the amulet's relocation to Karnak's treasury after a priestess's pilgrimage. A quirky fringe tidbit mentions that the priestess claimed the emerald whispered the princess's vow into her dreams, an assertion the scribes dutifully recorded but annotated with skepticism, perhaps fevered sleep or poetic fancy. Historians still argue whether such dream visions were reported by credible sources or later bardic stories. The next hand is Ptolemaic 3rd century BCE, penned in Greek script given by Ptolemy Philadelphus to the city of Alexandria's Great Museum, then reclaimed during Caesar's war for ultimate safekeeping. You trace the looping Greek letters, imagining the amulet displayed amid Hellenistic treasures, its Egyptian origin lending exotic gravitas. A mainstream historical fact here, Ptolemaic kings often offered Egyptian relics to Greek cities to solidify political alliances, blending cultures through shared reverence. A later entry from the Roman era records the amulet's transfer to a temple of Isis in Rome itself, a sanctuary open to both Egyptians and Romans. A fringe anecdote scribbles in the margin, "Disappeared during sack of Rome," rumored taken by shadowy devotees to Britannia. You pause, picturing hooded figures crossing misty hills with the emerald hidden in woolen folds. Historians still argue whether any credible Roman or British sources mention an Egyptian emerald relic. Skipping ahead to the Byzantine entries, 6th century CE, you read an altar inventory from a Cappadocian monastery, a jewel of green flame held by monks in secret vault, removed before invasion, fate unknown. A mainstream fact reminds you that many Egyptian artifacts survived early church looting by being secreted in monastic retreats, their pagan associations reframed as relics of early Christian marvels. The scroll continues with medieval Arab chronicles found in Cairo's Musharia quarter, described as Emerald of Mercy. Brought to the caliph's collector, later gifted to Toledo's Library of Wisdom. You imagine glittering palaces in Cordoba, scholars debating the amulet's symbolism alongside translations of Aristotle, its romantic origin, a whispered intrigue among philosophers. A 15th century Venetian merchant's log mentions a sale of a green gem of curious lore acquired in Alexandria's docks. The entry adds a rueful note, buyers unconvinced by seller's tale of royal embassies. Gem sold on to Genoa. You chuckle at the pragmatism some saw only monetary value, never understanding love's alchemy. Historians still argue whether any gem in Venetian inventories matches the amulet's description, or if such references are purely speculative. Finally, a modern annotation dated 1922 scrawled by an Egyptologist reads "Amulet lost" after Howard Carter's excavation of Tutankhamun's tomb, rumored to have been found among antiquities trafficked to Europe. You close the scroll thoughtfully, recognizing how often objects slip from official records into private hands, their stories fragmented. A mainstream fact, many artifacts from early 20th century digs entered museum collections without complete provenance, obscuring original contexts. You refold the chronicle and tuck it into your robes. The amulet's journey has crossed empires, faiths, and centuries, always carrying the princess's and scribe's vow in its heart. You trudge to the gallery's central hall, where a carved stone relief shows an ankh entwined with a lotus, symbols of life and rebirth. Here, you place the amulet atop a low pedestal carved in that very motif, letting its green glow mingle with torchlight. A hush settles, and you evoke its legacy in a soft whisper from forbidden love beneath Amenhotep's gaze, through priestly vaults and Hellenistic courts to monastic shadows and modern mysteries. Each transfer, each entry in scribal ledgers speaks of reverence and loss of commerce and concealment. Yet through it all, the amulet survives as a talisman of love's enduring power. You step back, tracing the relief with one fingertip, and vow that this story woven of token storms and decrees will endure as long as hearts dare to defy expectations. Historians still argue whether any single physical path for this amulet can be fully reconstructed, but its true journey lies in the love it symbolizes and the legends it inspires. You lift the emerald and press it gently into the relief's carved lotus. In that moment, its pulse feels steadier, less curse, more covenant. You step away, letting the gallery's silence honor its final resting space. As you exit into the palace's golden morning, the Nile's waters shimmer under cloudless skies, mirroring the amulet's timeless glow. The legacy of the amulet lives on in hearts and histories alike, binding past to present mortal to divine love to eternity. You've witnessed the amulet's full odyssey, a journey that began in a moonlit garden of papyrus reeds and concluded in empire-spanning chronicles. Now let the night's final echoes settle like warm sand on your skin. Feel the hush of ancient halls, the soft drip of subterranean springs, and the perfume of lotus incense at dawn. Allow your mind to drift along the Nile's gentle current, where each ripple carries whispered promises of devotion. Breathe deeply, tasting the sweet tang of date wine on your lips and the earthy warmth of red ochre on your fingertips. Inhale the scent of jasmine and myrrh, letting it soften the edges of tension. Imagine the emerald's glow fading to a gentle ember, cradled in the lotus-carved relief, a silent testament to love that defied curses, storms, and dynasties. As you lie down, let the palace's silent stones hold your worries. Picture the secret passageways you traversed, the tomb's chilling hush, and the storm's wild dance. Each memory a gentle stepping stone toward stillness. Remember the princess's radiant smile, the scribe's unwavering hand, and the high priest's solemn blessing, all gifts of mercy and faith. Now drift beyond palace walls into fields of papyrus under star-scattered skies. Feel the moon's silver light brushing your closed lids. There, in the quiet embrace of Egypt's timeless landscape, love's enduring heartbeat lulls you into calm. Sweet dreams, dear traveler, may your heart always find refuge in stories of courage, mercy, and unbroken bonds.